Morning. Good morning. Thank you for attending the second annual Oakland University Cyber Summit. My name is Arno Crowther. I'm the president of CyberOU. CyberOU is Oakland University's award-winning cybersecurity and technology organization. Since its founding in April of 2013, we've grown to over 300 members. CyberOU is also the recipient of SAFE's Best New Student Org, Outstanding New Student Organization of the Year, and Outstanding Educational Program for last year's Cyber Summit. The CyberOU team has hosted over 40 events and is devoted to three main principles. Education, we don't learn to hack, we have to learn. Service, we strive to make the world a safer place and give back to the community. And enjoyment, because technology and security can be fun. CyberOU wants to take a minute to thank those who made this summit possible. Dean Chamra, Associate Dean Zhu, Jane Dietrich, Peggy Chu, and Kathy Levelsberg. Lastly, I also want to thank all of our members, as well as the officers and mentors that I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with. I'm now going to invite our faculty advisor, Preston Brooks, up to the stage. He's going to introduce our guests. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Arno. Last summer, I was invited to be the faculty advisor for the CyberOU Club. What a privilege. What a privilege. This club is a faculty advisor's dream. Self-starting, diligent, and they do all the work. I've never been associated with a club in which we have graduates that have left the university with a degree and are working in private industry come back to be part of the club. In particular, Trip Blazewski and R.J. Fisher are here today, and I'd like to acknowledge them. You know, the other thing I would like to say about the club is, President Harry Truman once said, leadership is making a group of people do what they don't want to do and like it. The only problem with this club is they like it. So it's really been a privilege. The person that's learned the most in this club has been me, of course. And I also want to say what a privilege it is to have our keynote speaker today. Dan Lorman has been associated with the club for several years now. And as a matter of fact, he participated in one of the first cyber summits that Governor Snyder participated in and helped to kick off the Michigan State Cyber Initiative. Dan has held many statewide offices and federal offices. He was Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Michigan. He is in great demand throughout the world for speaking. He spoke from everywhere from South Africa to Moscow. So we're very fortunate to have him here. And I know that all of us will learn a lot from listening to the information that he is going to give us. So again, thank you very much, and let's give Dan a warm welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Especially want to thank the club. And I just want to echo those thoughts. This is a fantastic organization, and just really an honor to be here. I want to start off, before I get into my slides, they come on here, and talk about the Internet of Things this morning. I need to ask you all, who's watched the basketball last day or so? Anybody? A few, March Madness is here upon us, and a few big games today. Any Michigan State fans? 12-40, a few of you there. I do need to say, I don't have a Valpo slide this year. Some of you remember from last year. I do hail from Valparaiso University, and I know we played today 4:30, and I know Oakland is a rival, Oakland University, to Valpo, and you actually beat us in overtime this year in a great game. Anybody at that game? Nobody? Okay. Well, it was a good game here. Valpo beat Oakland actually at Valpo, but you owe it to us as Horizon League members to root for Valpo against Maryland at 4:30. So I just want you to know that. I mean, you got to cheer on Valparaiso. I did graduate in computer science there, and also went to Johns Hopkins. But so with that, a little bit of background, I'm just going to I had the opportunity to really kind of tee it off this morning. I want to talk about securing the Internet of Things. And I know we're going to have a great panel discussion and a lot of time for Q&A, really for the next couple hours. So really, write your questions down. We're going to have some chance to talk about this. But I'm going to dive right in and talk about the Internet of Things and where things are at. So before we dive into the issues of securing it, let's talk about the Internet of Things as a business necessity and what's going on. And so what are some definitions around it? I'm going to fly through some early slides and then get to the meat of this, and so hopefully some lessons. But what are the definitions? What are the examples? Kind of 1.0, 2.0. Talk about what can we think about as far as how do we secure the Internet of Things? What can we learn from history around this topic? And then final thoughts, and then we'll get to some Q&A and some panel discussion. So let's start off with some definitions. So when you think about the Internet of Things, what do you think about? How do you define it? Some people would say, Sans would say, it's really kind of everything in the spectrum. Every device in the world is going to have an IP address. So everything from PCs, routers, switches, medical machinery, smartphones. Everyone thinks about the home, which are some examples of that. Your kitchen, your microwave, everything's going to be connected. Then I think about, okay, let's come up with Dan's definition. I mean, most of us don't think about PCs and routers and switches. They already have connectivity. So for the most part, do you really include smartphones and tablets in that? Certainly medical machinery, SCADA, processes, controls, single-purpose devices. Although I will say that this is changing, and so, do you add them in or not? Clearly, we're starting to see with your smartphone, that they really do play together. So the idea that your smartphone could, control your home security system, or that they're interacting together. So there are different definitions out there of what it is, but clearly the model is that everything will have an IP address. It's all going to be interconnected in the world. Now, before I dive into some examples of this, I want to just say that clearly the Internet of Things is the cutting edge. Why did I pick that topic this morning? We're going to talk about BYOD, bring your own device, maybe wear your own device. We're going to talk about all these different things like the cloud and smartphones and PCs. But at the cutting edge is this topic. And there are plenty of blogs and articles and experts that will tell you we cannot secure this. But let's talk first about what's the attraction to the Internet of Things. I mean, a couple case studies that are out there right now. Intel out in San Jose, California. All the state CISOs and CIOs are going to be having a meeting out there in a couple of weeks. And so San Jose is a great city, been there many times. The idea that you could have downtown, case study one, interconnected devices around air pollution, that you could have street lights with Wi-Fi, the idea that sustainable traffic planning, air quality planning. There's plenty of examples out there with your smartphone actually, parking your car for automated ways to interact with different government devices. It's a huge space that's growing. So smart cities. Another one is the area of mechanical devices. So thinking outside the box of traditional smart cities, smart homes. Most of you probably haven't seen this one. It's one of my favorites. The Internet of Sheep. Wi-Fi connected flock to eat grass and transmit data. Kind of funny here, I know. But literally, this is out there. This is happening right now in Europe. It makes me wonder if the shepherds just want to be able to surf Wi-Fi out there as they're sitting out in the fields, right? And so they're actually, why do we have internet-connected sheep? But they say they're doing a study for academic purposes. But think, really outside the box, almost everything will have an IP address. The GE example I find fascinating, and dive into that a little bit with this next slide, but the idea that you have all of these sensors on these different turbines, but it could be any mechanical device all over the world. Think of remote places. The idea that one sensor on a GE gas turbine generates 500 gigabytes per day. There are 20 sensors on a turbine. And yet, so there's a lot of money involved in this, and these are out in sometimes, windmills, remote places, you just think of all the different types of devices out there. So what if, rather than waiting for a sensor to break, you could have an alert sent so you could go fix that before it broke? There's a concept, right? Makes a lot of sense, a lot of cost benefit to this in manufacturing. I mean, there's hundreds of examples like this. This is just GE, but most of the companies many of you are working with here in Michigan, car companies, others, huge opportunities around intelligent machines and intelligent devices. Then, of course, the big thing we all think about, Internet of Apple redefining the way we work. I mean, how many of you plan to get an Apple Watch? Anybody? Well, I got a few people. Okay. A gold one. Okay. Talk to the guy over here in the blue shirt. He's got money. Or how about maybe not? Maybe the Apple one's a little too expensive, but there are other watches out there, or wearable devices is a huge area. But you also think about the Internet of Things. We think about garage doors. We think about security systems and home heating systems and lights and Wi-Fi and smart technology, smart homes. There's all kinds of examples out there around this. So my point of bringing this up is not to focus on the opportunities, obviously to talk around, okay, what's the security around this? So what keeps a CSO like me or other CSOs in the room or security professionals up at night regarding smart connected devices? And unfortunately, as in a lot of other spaces, the answer is quite a lot. And so here's just two headlines I want to point out and two examples. But one, IoT devices not secured by design. Researchers finding in one study 25 security vulnerabilities per IoT device. I mean, if you go out and you research IoT security right now, you will hear many, many blogs from all over the world, and the answer pretty much is, we can't secure this. We can't secure the current internet. How can we possibly secure IoT? So there's very much the naysayer world of things, that this is really, really, some people would say, a bad idea. I'm not there. I'm in the middle. I'm going to talk about how we can address some of this, but I want to just show you some of these headlines that talk about that. A couple other scary headlines. Of 10 IoT connected home security systems tested, 100% were full of security failures. So again, you think about the opportunities with the Internet of Things and home security, but then Symantec warns worm can target Internet of Things as well and actually spread malware. And then this headline, Senator, your futuristic car is putting your privacy and security at risk. Now, I know we have some automakers here with us today. I'm a big fan of the Michigan auto industry, but this is being talked about across the nation. Everywhere I go, I hear this term. It's people say, did you see the 60 Minutes video? How many have seen that video? Just about a third. Well, guess what? You're going to see it right now. So I'm going to show it to you. Here you go.
This is a regular new car. The masking tape is only there because we agreed to obscure its make and model.
We'll give them the illusion they control the car for now.
Kaufman has been working on this for 5 years with multiple research teams.
You want to hit the fluids?
Oh my gosh.
There we go.
There we go.
What's that? What's that? What's that?
That's the windshield wiper fluid.
No, wait, so this is something that a hacker had...
That's right, a hacker, like obviously you didn't turn on the
I
windshield
didn't
wipers.
touch it.
Using a laptop, the hacker dialed the car's emergency communication system and transmitted a series of tones that flooded it with data. As the car's computer tried sorting it out, the hacker inserted an attack that reprogram the software, gaining total remote control.
Oh my God. Doing that? They could control the gas, the acceleration, they could control the braking.
That's right.
And they could do this from anywhere in the world.
Just try not to stop at the cones here.
She thinks she's going to be able to stop right at those cones. Let's make sure that she can't, and she's going to drive right through them. While complete control of that brake.
All right, there we go.
Oh, no, 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 no. Oh my God, I can't operate the brakes at all. Oh my word. That is frightening. That is frightening.
Okay, so I'm a big fan of our Michigan automakers. I'm not trying to mock them there, but it does raise the question, your average person would say, as you think about this topic, is if we can't possibly, the big automakers are having these kinds of issues, how can these new, inexpensive devices be secure? And so what I want to do for the next 15 minutes or so is just do a little bit of deeper dive in 3 areas to think about how we can think about security as we head into IoT security. And really kind of leave you with 3 lessons that I think we need to have, or think of it maybe as a framework for your thinking around this, or some ideas that we need to be focused on as we think about IoT security. So 3 lessons, and I'm going to close with some comments at the end, and then we'll wrap this up in about 15 minutes. So my first lesson is this. We need to learn from history if we possibly want to secure the Internet of Things. What can we learn from the last decade or 2 decades around new technology that will help us? Because tech history, in my opinion, repeats itself. Always with a twist. It's not always exactly the same as it was last time, but there's always a repetition. So what do I mean by that? Let's go back. Phil brought this up this morning. A story that I've told several times, and I'll tell it quickly. Some of you may have heard it before, some of you may not. But I'm going to go back a decade in Michigan government when I was CSO for the state and talk about Wi-Fi. And when Wi-Fi first came out back in 2000, 2001, 2002, some of you might say it came out in the early in the late 90s, but in Michigan government it was around 2003, 2004. It was a real hot buzzword. And the headlines at the time were very similar to the headlines we just saw at the time. Now most of you would say, how many of you use a Wi-Fi? Raise your hand. And everybody in the room. I mean, you go to coffee shops, and we all use Wi-Fi. And clearly there's issues at airports and things, but generally speaking, it's become kind of, everybody uses Wi-Fi. It's expected to use it at home. It's become almost the new normal, right? So even security professionals have moved on to bigger and better targets. We'll talk about some of those later, like the cloud and other things. But at the time, this was a hot issue. And the headlines were, Wi-Fi is insecure, do not use Wi-Fi, bad idea. And I was the CISO in Michigan. I was there as well. And I certainly, had done my homework. So I had gone to 3 other agencies, NSA, CIA, DIA. I had looked at all the white papers. I had all the documents backing me up, saying Wi-Fi, bad idea. Headlines, Home Depot was hacked. The guy literally was in the parking lot, got access to the cash register from the parking lot. This is insecure, that kind of a thing. There's all this bad news. And so then the message came down from management at the time, was Terry Takai. Terry Takai, who was with Ford, and then she was other places. And Terry, went on, by the way, very, very, very famous, went on to be CIO in California and CIO for the Department of Defense afterwards. She now works here in Michigan again. But Terry at the time, and the executive team working for the CIO said, we want to put Wi-Fi in all of our conference rooms. So I was the security guy. I was the CISO in charge. I had done my homework, and I was determined to stop this from happening. I was determined, we're not going to do this bad idea. So we went, had a staff meeting, everyone's in the room. Literally, we're in the room together, and came to that agenda item. There's 10 of us in the room. Terry said, okay, Dan, what's the plan? How are we going to securely put Wi-Fi in our conference rooms? And at the time, as I said, this was my stand. This was my Mount Everest here, right? So I was going to say, Terry, I've decided we're going to veto this project. We are not putting Wi-Fi in the conference rooms. And there was silence. And Terry said, I'd like everyone to leave the room but Dan. True story. So everyone gets up and leaves, and there I am with Terry Takai. You know, this was like 9 months into my role with Terry. I didn't really know her very well yet. We were still in the, you know, forming, storming phase. This was a storming phase, right? So this is not good for your career, by the way, if this happens. For you college students, you do not want this. Anyway, so bottom line is, Terry says, Dan, I know you've done your homework. I know you know your stuff. I don't even want to look at those documents you have piled up there. I know you got your reasons, and I know they're probably good reasons. But if that's your answer, you can't be the CISO in Michigan. And I'm like, really? And she said, I said, why? And she said, because I've been to Dow, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, and they all have Wi-Fi in their conference rooms. What do they know that you don't know? How are they doing it? I want you to come back in a week with an answer to how we're going to do this securely if you want to keep your job. Okay. That was a very, very big fork in the road in my career. Obviously, I kept the job. Terry became a real mentor for me. We went out, we did our research. 2 years later, yes, we rolled out Wi-Fi in our conference rooms. Yes, we did roll out that, and actually ended up getting awards a few years later in that. And actually led the nation for a while in the Wi-Fi security area. I would just say that to you for this purpose. The bigger thing for me in my career as a security professional was you need to look at how you can provide secure answers to existing problems. Yes, there were major flaws in Wi-Fi at the time. Some of you would say there still are, but most of us have moved on to other topics. My point is this, that was the cutting edge at the time. How do you, as security, enable technology in a way that is going to be positive and get the job done? So you have two opposing different forces in this space, and I argue that you have this in every new technology area. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the panel. On the one extreme, security is disabler. The answer is no. What was the question again? All new ideas are bad, and by the way, they're not secure. So on the other extreme, it's like, okay, you know, first to market. First to market, we'll worry about security later. I've been in a lot of IoT events in California and other places around the country where really security is, if they're thinking about it, they're not really very interested in it. We need the cool feature now. I want to be first to market. And it's like, what security? So those are the two extremes. The challenge is, how do you find the middle road? I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the end. But that's our challenge, our balancing act, is how do you find the balance between the two extremes in any new technology? So I can give you the example of Wi-Fi, but it could be cloud. We went through the same thing. BYOD, same discussion. I mean, several other topics, new technology, the same challenge. So the stakes are growing for IoT security. Just a few of the areas we need to think about. The cybersecurity challenges have not peaked. I've heard a number of people around the country in this room. This is a security conference, right? This is the security, you know, the hackers are here, so you all know this. But many people you talk to around the country, and they say, well, you know, we're gonna solve this security issue. But the bad guys are getting better all the time. And there's always something to steal. So even as we get better and better at technology, there's gonna be more and more opportunities. Also, you have issues beyond just your credit score, you have your reputation at stake. You have other things that we have to think about. So as we look at cars and not just money being stolen, but potentially health and health information, you start thinking about how that impacts people's lives. If you hack, Dick Cheney's famous words around his pacemaker, he didn't want the wireless turned on, right, for the defibrillator because he was worried somebody could literally, cause more than, harm to him. Medical devices are huge areas. So the bottom line is that this space is growing, the risks are growing, it's not just about money. And the people in this room, you are the leaders. You are the leaders. It's also about people's health, it's about their reputation, it's about their careers. So the second story, second lesson, and that is this. back in 2006, we had begun the challenge of testing what if our major U.S. utilities were hacked or we had a major failure like a cyber 9/11 or a cyber Armageddon. At that time, again, I'm a CISO, so we started this march of cyberstorms. Who's heard of cyberstorm before? Anybody? A few of you. Okay, cyberstorm was a DHS program testing with different countries around the world, UK, Australia, England, variety of different countries around Europe, and the US and Canada. And what if there was a catastrophic cyber attack that brought down the grid or brought down government, brought down multiple governments? So we started testing. In Michigan, we were involved in cyberstorms 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as a CISO, we helped put together scenarios around cyberstorm. And the one that really struck me the most that I learned from was this one. There was a scenario that was created where they literally attacked and blew up a data center in Michigan. And during the hacking of our data centers, there was a challenge that we got a call that one data center was blown up, the other one was hacked and was made useless. And in the middle of this, we get a call to replace this mainframe system to run government and our financial system. And again, this is all a test. This was not real, right? So this is a trial. This is an exercise. So we're doing this exercise, and there was somebody who was play acting a foreign company in France. And so we called the person up. This was actually a bull mainframe we needed at the time. We called them. They were simulated. They had the French accent and everything, right? And they're on the phone, and they're saying, yes, we understand you need a bull mainframe. He says, yes, and we know we're willing to pay $8.5 million for this bull mainframe. And the guy's like, no, he says, we want $45 million for the bull mainframe. And we're like, $45 million for the bull mainframe. And we're like, and I remember the team all sitting there at the table, and we were arguing. It was like, they want $45 million for the mainframe. And everyone was like, bottom line is this was extortion. This was extortion. Now, we thought, long story short, we negotiated, we ended up getting it for $20 million. It's all an exercise. We play acted this thing, and thankfully it all ended, and we had called a hot wash at the end where we walked through what did we learn through this exercise and that kind of a thing. But my point was this. We learned at that time, I said, we complained, and I was one of them. This is never going to happen in the real world. I mean, no one's ever going to try and extort data in the middle of a cyber attack, and this is ridiculous. What happened 5 years later? Who knows? We have this today. Ransomware, right? This happens today. The point is this. We weren't even thinking about the implications of in the middle of a cyber attack and a physical attack and bombs going off and people hacking into our government, that somebody may try and extort money from the government. This is during an exercise. This didn't really happen. But it turns out that actually, 5 years later, foretold ransomware and what actually was coming. So what's my point with telling you that? We don't really know. It's not obvious where the next attack is coming from. As we roll out the Internet of Things, as we roll out everything being connected, we think we know who the bad actors are. We think we know what's going to be the results. But the truth is we don't. We don't really know. And so obviously you see the wolf in sheep's clothes there. But the questions we ask are, what evil purpose could be applied to whatever I'm inventing in IoT? What protections are in place? We brainstorm to solve problems, but what new problems are we creating now? These are tough questions. I certainly did not expect that in the middle of a cyber attack, we get a call from a company in Europe saying we want $40 million for a mainframe. But that's exactly what happened. And the funny thing was, it turned out to predict exactly what one of the biggest challenges were in our security industry 5 years later, which is ransomware, which has become a big issue in America today, right? So, interesting. I learned that along the way. My third example is this, the power of culture. The power of culture. What do I mean by that? We're in the early days of IoT. The things you are doing now, the things we are doing now, the things that companies in Silicon Valley are doing now, the protections we're putting, going to admit to it, right? Social media site. So you access that one Facebook, or you use that same one at work, you use it at university, you use it at home, you use it other places. So my point is, you make assumptions, well this is secure, but then somebody gets the password and they access it. Or you assume that, well, my smartphone is secure, but somebody else gets a hold of that, and you don't have the screensaver one. So those kinds of things will affect how IoT rolls out. So I'm basically out of time. I want to stop and leave you with a couple of ideas here and wrap up. And that is final thoughts on securing IoT. And that is this. When I ask a forum, what advice would you give to security developers when you're thinking about how do you secure the Internet of Things in 2015? Going forward, how can we think about security in this new world? And the first thing everyone said, and I got this about 20 times, is build security in from the start. Think from the ground up, from the beginning. We're creating that new culture right now. It's easy to look back and see what happened with Wi-Fi, or the cloud, or mobile devices, or BYOD. But my question is, are we building security in? And 3 bits of advice. You can make more money selling secure systems than insecure systems. Cybersecurity of the device is as important as the device itself. And pay for professional penetration tests. Those got the highest votes from security pros who were thinking about this space. So 3 bits of practical advice. Is anybody developing an IoT right now? Raise your hand. Anybody? Nobody wants to admit it. Okay. But I think you will be. And certainly if you're in the security space, this is at the cutting edge right here. I think it's good advice. Is think about how do you build security into the device. Run a pen test and think about it. Just a little plug for Cyber Range, Michigan Cyber Range. They will do pen tests. They will take those devices. And Joe Adams can talk about that a little bit during the panel discussion. But certainly there are people in this room that can help you in each of these 3 areas. So with that, I know we're going to take some questions during the panel. And so I'll leave you at this time and I'll hand it back to our moderator. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. I'd like to now introduce the moderator for our panel. Teresa Rowe is one of the persons in the university, the Chief Information Technology Officer for the university. She has been with the university since 1985. Teresa has been supportive of the Cyber OU Club since its inception. She is known widely throughout the information technology industry as well as information technology security. And we're very grateful to have the privilege of her leadership and her knowledge as the moderator for our panel. So, Teresa.
Should come up now. Okay. We're going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves when they get up here. Dan, we met you. Thank you very much for the exciting talk this morning. It was, it's always interesting to think about, and Internet of Things, boy, another thing for CIOs to worry about. And if we could go down our table here and introduce yourselves and give us a little background about your security interests.
So I'm Rod Davenport, Chief Technology Officer for the state of Michigan, also interim Chief Security Officer following in Dan's footsteps. So a long time IT geek, as you can tell, because of my pencil neck and slouched posture. I guess, on the spectrum, spiritually, I tend to be more of a, kind of a new tech type of guy. My Raspberry Pi 2 just arrived up a back order, so that's been kind of an exciting thing. But, wearing the security hat, I've become increasingly aware of the importance of cybersecurity, and I like the sentiment of finding that interim road. Security is an enabler, so it's got to be in a nutshell.
Good morning. Phil Berlini, I'm the Deputy County Executive and CIO for Oakland County Government. And security has just permeated everything we do. And now and Dan's talk was right on. I'm a little worried about his need to put sheep in his slide, but just saying out loud. Yeah, I'm there for you. But there is such a need now to think security first in everything we do, and we're developing technologies and applications that are storing data about our citizens. And if we're not able to secure them, they will lose faith in us in a hurry. So security is very important.
I'm Dr. Joe Adams. I'm a reformed Army guy. So I did I was in the Army for about 26 years, doing operations, security, and I taught information assurance and hacking at West Point a couple times. So I've done the spectrum of security, and so I kind of view that it needs to permeate everything. So we have the Internet of Things, but we also need to think security that is ubiquitous. I'm also the geekiest guy up here, as evidenced by my facial hair. And
Is this a contest? Because I don't want to play.
he has earrings, and okay, so I tell we do this a lot. But I think it's exciting to be here. It's exciting to be doing security at this time because people are gaining awareness. And as Phil said, as we put more information and more data online or expose that to people, security has to be drawn more to the forefront. Hello everyone, my name is Titus Melnick. I probably have the longest, most confusing title here because it's hard to define what information security is. Let's just say that I pretty much speak for all information security topics at SC Chrysler, or whatever our name is this week. But my specialties, I've been doing this for 15 years, my specialty has always been on the social engineering and the network hacking side, and going way back, I used to be a phone freaker, meaning I used to hack phones. What's really important right now is this continues to evolve, is that the weakest point is our people. And we need to be very careful we don't terrify people and scare them from using technology. There's so much functionality that we're carrying in our pockets today, and we need to find a way to make it reasonable, to balance the risk versus the reward. The only way to be fully secure is to not let people have the technology, and it's just not optional. The world we live in today is awesome, but the threats that we're up against are always evolving. So we need people like themselves to be thinking about how can we use this and how can we secure it. Or if we know what the vulnerabilities are, how do we convince people or communicate to them what actions they can take to protect themselves? Because you can have a 30-character password and automatic pins and whatnot, but if someone's going to just hand their device to someone else or hand their personal data to a service and not understand how it's being shared, we've lost that battle.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Louis Kunimatsu. I am a supervisor in the security department at Ford Motor Company. I've been with Ford 29 and a half years. In security for about the past decade. Prior to that, I went through the Six Sigma program at Ford, so my background is more in quality, and I always look at security as an aspect of quality. To a lot of good points here from the panel so far. Awareness is very key, and one of the things that I see as being a challenge or a way to get our arms around security is typically there's a lot of fear from the general populace. People who aren't security specialists have this fear around insecurity and almost a reluctance to talk about it. And part of our job as security professionals is make security more tangible, understandable, put that consistent framework around it so people understand where they're vulnerable and where the threats are, and take the actions to address them. I do a lot of threat modeling And I think that is one of the key things to address some of the questions that Dan presented in the keynote. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of that during the panel discussion. But thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for those inspiring introductions. It gives us a sense of what careers are out there in the future for us. As I go through these questions, I'm going to open up with a question, and then I'll ask our audience if they have any follow-ups. So to get this started, we watched the video this morning about from 60 Minutes in the cars being taken over by hackers. A little bit scary for everybody, and we also hear about Google and self-driving cars. I'm going to look to our automotive specialists here. Titus, maybe you could kick this off. Technology is used in more and more of our vehicles, and that technology is becoming more and more advanced. Are there limitations here? Is there a point where we say, this is too much? Is there something more to think about?
What am I allowed to say here? Well, let's keep some things in mind. Some of the data that we have to collect in vehicles is being mandated by the government, right? There's a lot of interest in making sure that the cars aren't being tampered with as far as exhaust systems and whatnot. And so we are obligated to collect that information. But once you're connected to the car, then there's all these opportunities, right? Oh, look at, we can now improve the cars. We can find out where they're at. We can gather more information to make them better. But how do you do that in a way that maintains the privacy of the consumer? How do you do it in a way that stops or prevents hackers from hacking into those vehicles? The only way to figure this out is to have that discussion, have those people in the room, because there's so many ways to use that data. I can't think of that. I'm a security person, right? I look at the car and go, man, that's cool, I want that, but I don't want it to do this. But then there's the engineers who understand the CAN bus, understand how the various components within the vehicle can communicate and how that improves the car. I need to sit with them and have those open discussions so I can explain to them my fears and my concerns. They can tell me the benefits and ways to secure that, or we can at least understand what we don't understand so we can reach out to our supplier partners that are already concentrated on the vehicle security or the security for the, apologize, I don't know the term, those PLCs and those things that just really don't have enough memory to say participate in a PKI or to do code signing and whatnot. I apologize for the rambling answer, but that is a loaded question.
It is, and when you think about technology in the vehicle, risk presents itself in a number of ways. When you talk about the vehicle, risk presents itself in a number of ways. And what is the one that is probably most prevalent in society is automotive accidents and fatalities. And by applying technology to the vehicle, there's an opportunity there to, well, how many people have seen poor driving behaviors exhibited out there? Right, quite a few, right?
How many exhibit poor driving behavior?
The vehicle communication has the potential to reduce collisions substantially. I mean, we wouldn't put technology into the vehicle if there weren't tangible benefits. So you have to weigh these things out with the risk, right? Now, having vehicles talk to each other and telling, just simple information, which direction am I going and how fast am I going, to prevent collisions, the potential there is huge to reduce the number of collisions and fatalities. So there's clearly huge benefits by putting technology into the vehicle. Now, speaking more to Titus's point, privacy and collecting information from those vehicles is, people are worried about that, obviously. GPS, but how much more so than your phone? I mean, you can track GPS tracking off of these devices, very similar. But, through anonymization, and I'm sure I don't speak for FCA or for Ford, but there's compliance requirements around this. And I know at Ford we are very, very cognizant of that consumers own their data, we are custodians of it, and we have to respect that. I mean, the reputational damage from something, poor, the adverse action occurring would be huge. So it's clearly at top of our mind, but technology wouldn't go into the vehicle if there weren't huge opportunities there to make the world a better place, make the vehicle a better place, safety, so on and so forth. So that's the point I would make. can you go too far? There is a balancing act, as Dan alluded to in his presentation, but just the opportunity is something, I think there's too much there to pass up. We've got to take the risk to gain the rewards.
So if I can make one more comment here, and that is, as much focus as there is on cybersecurity, there's also the same focus we're seeing in the automotive industry for privacy. So almost every industry now has a privacy working group with all the members, cybersecurity, we sit at that as well. But that is another area that I would say coincides with the focus on security.
So I would be the naysayer here, having sat on panels about vehicle-to-vehicle communication. I mean, Lewis is right. The opportunity for the stated purpose is great. I mean, you know, I've heard all kinds of claims about saving as many lives as the seat belts did and all this other stuff. But what I caution is people haven't thought of the unique ways to use that data. So that while your car is broadcasting its vector, its speed and direction to all the cars around it, there's nothing to stop an insurance company from setting up responders along the side of the interstate and going, hey, Lewis, you happen to drive along I-96 at the busiest time, and you happen to be going about 5 miles too fast, so we're just going to raise your insurance rates. Thank you. Same thing with Easy Pass. Anybody got Easy Pass? You know, you go, if you're like me and you came from the East Coast, you just cannot exist without it. Okay? Try going through New Jersey without an Easy Pass. It doesn't work. Okay? But then, 10 years ago, it was, okay, it's convenient, it helps everybody, it helps the state collect its money, it helps you go to get to your destination better, and now we're finding that those are FOIA or subpoenable data records. So, hey, you want to go someplace and you want to deny you were there, well, wait a minute, I've got the Easy Pass records that say you got off the interstate at that exit at that time. So now where were you? So it's good. It's very, I'm trying to find the right, it has all the right motives. My caution is, however, there are other people, especially when money's involved, who will find new and unique ways to use the data. And so we really need to spend a lot more time thinking about that.
Phil, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, in Oakland County, we're very involved in vehicle-to-vehicle technologies. We have a connected car committee that's working on some of those areas. And I'd like to agree first that there's huge benefits to doing this. And the safety piece alone, the data we're seeing is incredible. And that this could be a real game changer for how people drive. It's not going to stop people from doing dumb things on the road and yelling obscenities and waving to each other. But what it will do is it will potentially keep two cars from smacking into each other or going through an intersection when they shouldn't or whatever it may be. So now, obviously there's issues with infrastructure. I mean, there are test beds right now in Oakland County, and there's test beds in Ann Arbor and I believe in Detroit, where they're testing these technologies, but the infrastructure to build around it for the cars to talk to each other is very expensive. So there are going to be some issues there. But I do want to talk about the security piece and what you're worried about in regard to what people are going to use it for. I'm a public official. Everything that I do at work is FOIAble, Freedom of Information Act. It means anything I do, who I call, who I talk to, all my emails, everything I talk about is FOIAble. If I'm not worried about where I'm going or what I'm doing, what do I care?
Well, thank you, Secretary Clinton.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a server in my basement. yeah, running for president. But, so, when you think about that and subpoenaed, if something's being subpoenaed, then obviously there's some sort of court case around it. So I guess I'd rather, and Dan put it very well in his presentation, and I want to go back to what Dan said. Everybody was afraid of Wi-Fi when it came out. Everybody was worried about the security, but we all use it. Everybody's worried about the Internet of Things, but we're all going to use it. And these connected vehicles, they're already taking information from the cars. There's already information in the cars, yet we all want that wonderful navigation system. And by the way, if you want to know where I am, that's cool, follow me around, you're going to be really bored. But this technology is coming and it's here to stay. So we have to find the best way. There are some concerns, but we're going to have to live with that. I don't think we have a choice.
Yeah, and I think the smart Rod, go ahead.
I didn't know if I should take a turn. I mean, I guess if we... Thank you. We'll leave that later. So how many students do we have today? All right, so quite a few. Cool. So these are always my favorite things because I get to take the opportunity to get a little more philosophical than I normally would, just to, in the spirit of expanding our minds.
You're good at it too.
Well, thank you. So I think part of the question was, is it too much technology? So autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, is it too much? And I think if in building off of Dan's historical view, I think that both is true, right? It is always too much and it is always never enough. And so, the way that these things tend to evolve over time is this dynamic balance that's achieved, as the forces kind of work themselves out. So if we go all the way back to, automating the loom, right? And kind of the root of we're going back to the loom, the root of the Luddites, right? And so there's always this kind of reaction against, hey, this technology is taking control away from us, and we as a people don't like that, right? And sometimes it threatens our livelihoods, and it threatens kind of the way that we conceive of how things work. And I think the closer that you are to sort of the cutting edge, maybe the more comfortable you are with that. And I think that really goes back to that you understand it and know more about it, kind of can connect the bridge between the present and the future. But as that technology gets absorbed and rolled out, I think to more and more people, we are going to surface some more of these things. And although it's good to say we have to build security in from the start, I think the reason that doesn't happen is that when you're doing something new, it's difficult because we haven't done it before. And the things that we do to make things secure get in the way of actually getting the thing to work. So if we're saying, okay, well, I'm going to build encryption in from the beginning, and so all my communication with the PLCs is going to be encrypted, well, that is a hindrance to my debugging process, right? Because I can't actually see what the communication is very easily. And so, we're either going to have to pay a price to say that the pace of new development is going to slow down, maybe exponentially, depending on, the workarounds we have with security, or we're going to have to kind of come up with new ways that we can think about, making things more secure, probably through layers of abstraction, which I think is the way that some of this stuff has been solved in the past. But I guess to the larger point, the self-driving cars is very cool because I agree that there's a tremendous potential to make us safer, right? And if you look at vehicle accidents, it's up in the top 10 for sure of things that take our lives. But at the same time, probably none of us is really comfortable, saying, oh, I'm just going to sit back and let the car take me where I'm going, just because of our experience using our PC and blue screens and all that. I mean, it's one thing if I have to control alt delete, it's another thing if I've got an airbag in my face, right? So, but I think over time, as we've seen, engineering will solve a lot of these problems, and we'll get to a point where we're comfortable enough and we have enough infrastructure that it works well enough that we hopefully can extract more good than bad.
Well, let's add on to this. Most of our public agencies, our government entities, buy fleets of vehicles, or they're policing agencies. Are you looking at self-driving vehicles and the security issues as you have enhanced your policing fleets? Or how are we evaluating security of this?
We're looking at hovercraft. It's one way to get away from potholes. But there's so much technology in a police cruiser today. We have mobile data computers. We have, printers. I mean, they have fingerprint scanning machines in these.
It's a computer on wheels.
Yeah, it is. It's a computer on wheels. As far as self-driving goes, though, there's a lot to be learned about that. I mean, we all watched the movie. What was that movie? Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone when they had the car and it would just drive itself. And I don't know about you, but I'd love that because I don't like to drive that much. But a police cruiser, I just don't know. I mean, there's so many things that they have to do, whether we would even consider that. But the technologies, the problem we're having with police cars today is having enough power in them to drive all the technology. The battery systems and everything else that we have to have. And so we can't just run around and say, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and use an electric car. I don't know if I can charge it enough to make it run all the computers. But I don't know if that's mature enough for us to say that we're going to even look at it yet.
So last week I was at the Wisconsin Cyber Summit. And for those of you who don't know, last week the city of Madison, Wisconsin was under a massive DDoS attack in response to the shooting that happened there. And one of the things that I found out that I hadn't realized was because of the massive amount of mobile terminals and communications devices in the police cars, they were having a real hard time dispatching emergency vehicles because, of course, their IP system was down. So they had no phones in their emergency center because they're all voice over IP. They didn't know how to identify a police officer when he called in to reboot his mobile terminal because they didn't have that kind of protocol. You had firemen faxing things back and forth. You know, here's where I am. Please tell me where I need to go. So we're talking about potential, but we also have to now talk about increased vulnerability because we've increased the attack surface.
That's an excellent point. I think it speaks to the Internet of Things theme. This dependency we have on the technology, when it gets taken away, denial of service, what do we do? And in a lot of cases that hasn't been thought of. That's one of the things that worries me about connected vehicle is, what if someone, everybody's riding along in their autonomous vehicles and someone throws a frequency jammer on an intersection and turns it on, all of a sudden these people who may not have driven in the past several years, are forced to try and do something. And so, I see that people can't do math anymore. They have to take their cell phone out and use a calculator to do, 40 divided by 4. And this dependency is really, can be an Achilles heel when it comes to these technologies.
Guys, I just worry when I drive somewhere I don't know and my GPS doesn't work. How does this paper thing work?
Wait, how many of you have watched The Last Man on Earth on Fox? There's a Michigan guy that writes that. Him and I went to school together, and to watch that, I mean, it's a comedy, so there's a lot of stuff that's pretty wild on it, but it shows what would happen if you don't have the basics, like running water and all the other pieces that go along with electricity. And I couldn't agree with these guys more. As more we depend on this, how many people also remember the blackout in 2003? Remember that? I was in the emergency operations center in Oakland County, and we had a generator, so that was great. I was all excited about that. Then I had to worry about my family not having any power. And then I decided to go down Woodward Avenue, and there was a line for a gas station because someone had taken a generator and put it on one of their gas pumps, and they were filling cars, and there was fist fights in line. That was one day! And they were fighting over gasoline. So I can only imagine what that has, and we're going to have to deal with that as a society because it's coming.
It's interesting you mentioned the blackout because I remember when that happened and our CISO said that he walked into the command center and he said, they asked him about it and he said, well, we've never been more secure.
When I look at the internet with vehicles, then I become more aware of vehicular ad hoc networks, or the concept of an ad hoc network. That's shifting things. We're used to having a fixed network with a defined perimeter, that with someone being responsible for that network. How does the responsibility shift when we move to ad hoc networks? Do we have any thoughts on that?
We have a problem, right? In Houston, we have a problem. I mean, we're going to have issues, we're going to have attacks, we're going to have, because our world has spread out, our footprint is spread out. I have 400 mobile workers in Oakland County that require mobile devices to be able to access systems to do their job. So I can't just worry about having that defined network and all the controls in place. And the other thing too, and Dan talked about this as well in his presentation, it's about managed risk. What am I willing what risk level am I willing to accept? Now, because someone said a long time ago, I was at a conference, they said we could take all our computers, wrap them in bubble wrap, and throw them in the Detroit River, and they'd never be hacked. Then I can never use them. So what are we going to use, and how are we going to do our jobs? And then, by the way, we're going to have to accept some of that risk. And when we get attacked, it's not if, by the way, it's when. And when we get attacked, we'll just have to make sure we're able to respond and recover and get back to business. Because that's all we can do.
If I could just speak in general here, everyone has Wi-Fi on their phones, and we're running out of bandwidth, right? Where the wireless spectrum is out of space. There's only so many channels. If you look at what Marriott was trying to do, like in their conference centers, they wanted to jam hotspots, and that's so that you would have you'd have reliable internet access to their wireless access points. But then that gets to freedom. Shouldn't I have a right to use my Wi-Fi in my spot or in my pocket? What if you're at a production plant? Almost all those tools are speaking over Bluetooth or various flavors of 802.11, right? What if there's so many workers that have, I carry at least 3 devices on me at all times. What if that's interfering with the corporate systems? Do I have a right to tell that person you can't bring your phone in? But if they don't have their phone, how are they going to get calls from their kid, or what if there's an emergency? It's a real issue.
So for all the students out there, a great research area is in ad hoc routing and an ad hoc network. There have been lots of work done on incentivizing people to help route traffic. So what do I give you that makes it worth your battery time to route my CNC machine? You know, maybe my phone can route for the CNC machine, or maybe it can route for me. But it's all a trade-off, because the more it does that, the more power it consumes, and especially for mobile devices. Honestly, the battery is the limiting factor. So how do you work all that together? So just a
Man in the middle attacks just,
yeah.
ooh.
Where's the middle? Well, this is a good point for me to look around the room and see, are there any follow-up questions on this topic from our audience? Yes. Could you, do you have a mic here? Yeah. Thank you. Please ask your questions into a mic.
Hi, my name is Ahmed Mansour. I'm a PhD student here in Computer Science Department. Just because we are doing research in Vanity area this semester, I want to ask something. Can we apply public key cryptography in Vanity in an efficient way to keep the data transmitted between vehicles more secure? And what is the top challenges to do that? Thank you very much.
So the question, elliptic key cryptography? Was that your specific question?
Elliptic key
Public key,
cryptography or
the
public
curve?
key?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Couldn't quite.
I just asked about public key.
Public key.
Yeah, if it's elliptic key, it will be more specific. I will be thankful.
I would, my personal view on PKI is the only people that can really do it are the Defense Department, because you have a huge key management problem. And especially if you've ever worked with a big PKI and you try and push that certificate revocation list around, it's a tremendous challenge in both management, record keeping, but also in bandwidth. I know that when I was doing it for the Army, we were pushing around a 6 gig CRL, and it had to reach the endpoints of the network every 6 hours. And the only people that I know that have that kind of money and that kind of just sheer stubbornness to make it work is going to be the Defense Department. So when you look at commercial PKIs, you're going to have longer certificate leases. You're going to have to make accommodations for those limitations.
Thank you very much.
Just to add one thing, these comments are my own, they're not from the FCA. For PKI to be really effective, you need to have constant network communications, right? So you can revoke those certificates, just make sure everything, the certificate authorities are signed properly. In a vehicle, I don't want a car going down the road at 120 miles an hour and then lose connectivity and not know what to do.
But I think for elliptic cryptography, I think it's look promising because the key is shorter than the others.
But the key's shorter, but the math behind it is harder.
Yeah, the mathematical
So
problem.
now you
I know. Just the idea that maybe we can use more time to deal with public key better than dealing with the secret key, because you know about key management and these problems. If we can just apply directly the public key algorithms and the values, I think it will be more secure, right?
Yeah.
I know there is a cost.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the mountain to climb.
Yeah, the mobility, the power limitation, these things. I think it's a good area of research to start digging deep on, right? It's worth it.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think that the key management's always the sticky part with all this, and then, even if it's managing the CRL, or if it's, trying to maintain the citadel around your private secret key, right, if you're going to do symmetric. So, that I think is a good place for people to start thinking about what the future of that could look like, because, to Joe's point, when, I feel like I'm stuck in this historical space today, but, the development of it, if you go back to kind of the early days, there was a limited number of hosts, and so, how do we make that secure? Well, they came up with this method, but, to scale it is the problem, and I think that it solved the problem of the day, but it's not really great to solve the problem of today. fundamentally, I think the math behind it is fine, but it's just, the management, as you start growing to Internet of Things scale, becomes a little unwieldy.
Thank you. I think we have another question over here. Yes, thank you.
Do you have the microphone? Elon Musk said that artificial intelligence is like summoning a demon, like we're not ready with that type of technology yet. And another thing that I have a question on is in a national security forum, they said that by 2025, security and privacy will be dead. What are your opinions on that? I mean, what is your opinion on that?
Summoning demons is Rod's job.
So that whole comment's interesting in a lot of different ways. So all right, so here's one extreme way to think about that, I think. If you think about, organisms in terms of long spans of evolution, right? Things get pushed out when it's sort of their time to go, or it's really more about their lack of ability to adapt to changing environments. But if there is some sort of artificial intelligence that far eclipses the capability of humanity, then maybe by definition, just strictly from an evolutionary perspective, perhaps it's time for humanity to go. Obviously, that's not pleasant for us.
Kill the machines before they kill us. Terminator?
Yeah, right. It's obviously not pleasant for us, but there's a certain inevitability to that really is outside of our control in a way. So if we say, well, we're not going to pursue AI, and if we could actually get solid collective agreement on that, it probably would work, but we have a hard time maintaining solid collective agreements around anything for long periods of time. And so, to a certain extent, I think the genie's out of the bottle, and what we really have some control over, I think, is maybe the rate of progress. There's another question that's, I guess, more philosophical as to whether, what is the nature of consciousness and can that actually be replicated, within a computer. But, I almost think it's a little bit too soon to start worrying about whether the AI is going to snuff out humanity because, if we look at Siri, I mean, it's really not that great, right? Right. And, Kurzweil with his, march to the singularity, I don't know. I mean, the whole Moore's Law thing has held true, but I think from the software side, it's been more difficult, I think, to capitalize on some of the gains of the hardware. So there's a lot of engineering problems that need to be solved. I think there's some philosophical issues that maybe we still need to work through. But I'd probably within our lifetimes, I'm not sure that we need to be concerned with being extinguished by artificial intelligence.
I'd follow two points on that. One, quickly on the artificial intelligence, I've heard dates 2040, 2045, not 2025. So I'd love to know who said 2025. I don't. So that's one question. But on the security and privacy, I really wanted to address that. I've been hearing that for decades. I've been in this industry 30 years. I don't buy it. I'll tell you why. Number one, you're always going to have bad guys. It gets back to whatever you create, somebody's going to try. That's one of the points I was trying to make in my presentation. There are going to be people who are going to try and, whether it's the car, whether it's your bank account, whether it's, you name it, access to your health records, you've got to be thinking in terms of how could this be used for good and for evil. And unless you think all of a sudden evil is going to disappear in the next decade, which I don't subscribe to, then you're going to have hackers in 2025 trying to do bad things. So whatever new technology you create, and we'll come back in 10 years and write me back trip going, somebody's going to try and do something to get into that data. They're still going to try and steal your money. They're still going to try and get into your pacemaker or your car or your whatever. So the idea that 10 years from now we're going to create some technology that security is not going to be relevant or privacy is not going to be relevant, I don't accept that. I don't believe it. And I've heard people say that, and I've heard people say that back in the 90s as well. And they were wrong then, and they'll be wrong in 2025.
So I think it's also about expectations, right?
So don't raise your hand, but I know a lot of folks in this room probably really wound up about the NSA listening to cell phone conversations, monitoring traffic, and you're the same people that will turn on geolocation on Facebook, check in at Foursquare, and tell the world what you had for breakfast. So,
Reading my Twitter.
exactly. You know, I come from a part of the world where people don't lock their doors at home. In fact, most of them leave their keys, and if you followed some of the news, a lot of them leave armed or loaded weapons in their vehicles. Come to Detroit, that wouldn't wash. So the expectations of privacy are completely different from Highland County, Virginia to Oakland County, Michigan. So is security dead? No, I don't think it'll ever die. I think our expectations will change. So I think that's, when I was growing up, we never locked our doors, now we do. That kind of thing.
I have a question. Why are people so worried about it? Like saying all that stuff in forums and things like that, and in the conferences.
It's provocative and it gets us on TV.
People will say whatever they have to do to create an argument that's sensational. And there's some people out there that when we were trying to do our Wi-Fi in Oakland County a number of years ago, I had people sending me letters about how I was giving them nosebleeds and how they were wrapping their houses in aluminum foil to make sure the signal wouldn't go in. So we're always going to have those people. No matter what we do, everything we try, they're always going to be.
I'm not sure I totally agree. Again, these comments are my own. I think when you have that much data, first of all, I hope you all realize you're a commodity, right? Your information, who you are, is being bought and sold everywhere, okay? I mean, there's a reason why Facebook is free. You are giving them data that they're farming. When you have that much data in one space, there is an ability to use it for evil. Right? If the government were to suddenly say, hey, I am concerned about people that have a particular political persuasion, they can pull information about those people, use that to embarrass them, or use that to collect, we're seeing it. And when you look at the European Union, for example, their definition of sensitive personally identifiable information includes your political persuasions or your political party affiliations. So I think there is a possibility this could be used for bad. But I don't want to be alarmist here because, again, we all know the benefits of having geolocation turn on to be able to communicate with others. But I think we need to be careful who has access to it and that it's not moved around without our knowledge.
I'm a little unsure though why they put chips in cheap though. So.
I think there's a question of context. There's a question of context here. I saw Whitfield Diffie speak a few years back at U of M. And he noted that this is the era of intelligence, and it's increasingly difficult to tell the good guys from the bad guys. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the recent information about the quantum group. They're compromising Seagate hard drives. The firmware has become pre-installed with malware and goes in memory. You can't detect it, and apparently this has been around for quite some time. And it appears to be that this was, the vendors were asked to do this in the name of national security. So in a sense, it's insecure by design to preserve national security. So this anachronism, you have to look at the context and telling who the good guys are from the bad guys and who needs to get your information and who doesn't. There's a lot of questions there. I clearly don't have the answers, but we live in interesting times.
So let's move on with our next topic here, and we'll come back for more questions in a couple minutes. Our next topic is the cloud, and we are all talking about what services should remain on-premise and what services that we can move off into the cloud. And the cloud can be a variety of things, everything from purchasing computing cycles to storage of large amounts of data, to integrated application systems. As I look down our table here, how are you making the decision to put a service or data or processing into the cloud, and how do you make it secure? And maybe, Rodney, you could kick us off from a state level.
So the state is cloud friendly. And part of our new digital strategy is that we hope to be 85% cloud over the next 4 years. Now, that being said, I think we're going to have to kind of paint a broader definition of cloud to include, private cloud on premise as well as, hybrid and public cloud. And a lot of it really, I think, is going to center around the data classification. So some of the things in government are, well, basically everything's paid for through tax money, but some of it is designed to be public so that we make some attempts, having things on a public website for people to get to. We've started to try to do some open data, open API things so that people can reach deeper into the data that, is intentional to be available to the public. And then there's other things like, your state tax returns that are definitely designed to be, held a little closer to the vest. So, to demystify the cloud a little bit, it's basically just a data center that you don't run, right? So there's not a lot of, silver bullet magic to the concept of a cloud. But I think the reason it's attractive is because competently, running a data center consistently is difficult and sometimes painful. And so if, companies and organizations can achieve some economy of scale to say, I'm really going to focus my business around doing this really well, and I can get a bunch of people to kind of spread the cost, then it becomes financially and operationally attractive to do that. The challenge of it is that you're really shifting control again. That seems to be another common theme to say, well, when it's within my data center and it's kind of our people that are working on it, I feel better about it because I can sort of validate that everything is working as designed. When it's in the cloud, they can be audited, and we certainly look at that, and but you really need to go back to kind of a contractual agreement to say, well, okay, so you tell me that your data center is certified and that everything's encrypted and that your people are background checked, and we have a third party that audits that, and it makes me know that it's true. But if something happens, it's still 1 degree removed from my control, and I think that's where there's some level of discomfort still. That you're basically putting your trust and faith in a third-party organization, and that's always kind of an uncomfortable thing. But as cloud becomes more popular, and as we get better with I think encryption tends to be kind of the silver bullet for all of this. That if the data is encrypted, the risk of breach is less. But kind of getting back to your embedded systems notion, the problem with encryption is it's very complicated. And there's very few people, I think, that actually know if something is secure, right? If you go back to some of the some of the encryption algorithms that they were allegedly weakened by the NSA, but people, just looking at the math, most of us probably can't tell. Is this algorithm substantially weaker, or is there an intentional,
Well, that's what that little lock means, right?
Right.
As long as that lock is there.
As long as the lock is there.
See that lock in the browser.
Right. So again, we really, for the sake of efficiency and scale, we place our trust in a lot of these, third-party tools that are foundational to security, and then sometimes that trust ends up being misplaced. So, again, over time, I think that will be better. You also have an economy of scope concept that if I have a problem and I'm running on the same platform, a lot more other people have that problem, and so there's a lot more motivation to get it quickly fixed, and a lot of eyes make for shallow bugs. And so there's some actually good structural things about cloud, but we're still probably in the first half of cloud maturation, so we're just experiencing some growing pains there.
Well, so we're also cloud friendly, something we have in common. But there's an assumption here that if I put it in the cloud, it will be less secure than having it myself. And I can tell you that's not always the case. We're a very big consumer of Amazon Web Services, and we're putting some of our computing power out in the cloud, and we're finding that they have more security in some cases than what we had in place for our system. So if I'm saying I have to keep it internal to keep it secure, that might not be the best answer. Now the difficulties, though, are mainly, quite honestly, there's two things that I think are going to put a bug into the cloud world. One, connectivity. If I don't have good connectivity to the cloud, I'm not going to be able to use it because I need real-time access. I'm not going to be able to take my law enforcement systems and put them into a cloud environment if there's any delay in accessing them. So there's issues that I have to deal with there. And then secondly, it's not a technology problem, it's a contractual problem. We run into problems with, the ability to, one, can I keep my data in the United States? Well, why do I want to do that? I don't want to have my data governed under laws outside of this country, because we all heard what happened when, I think it was Google in China had their data center in China that was going to have data from LA County. I think it was the police department that said, wait a minute, why is our law enforcement data going to end up in China, where they can just take it if they want to? The other problem we have is that what Rod was alluding to is that how do we access it? How do we get at it? Who else can get at it if the company is being audited or those things? And what are the security? And if you're breached in the cloud, it's breaching us. And people have to say, oh, well, the cloud, it's in the cloud now. I don't have the responsibility to worry about whether it's breached. It's still our data, and it's still our system. So if they get breached, it's Oakland County getting breached. It's not Amazon Web Services. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but this, as we talked about Internet of Things, cloud computing is not going away. And the ability, and what I always look at it is demystify it as well. It's just a big way to share services. It's a place where we can start consuming technologies instead of owning them and turning what was a capital expense into an operating expense. Now all finance people get all freaked out over that, because now my line item is going to go up a couple $100,000 where I could have bought it for $1 million and depreciated it on the books. But that's going to happen. And as soon as we get there, I think we're going to go even harder into the cloud than we are today.
I think someone else mentioned it's a question of risk management. I was at a seminar a few years ago and someone said, well, if you have a house in New York and a house in the middle of Montana, where do you want to put your locks? And they purported New York because there's so much traffic. Well, the question is, if you keep the cat litter in New York and you keep the gold bricks in Montana, then you want the locks in Montana. So it's risk management, it's not risk elimination. And you need to think about what you want to put out there. When you put it there, it's just like outsourced hosting in that you have a loss of physical control and a loss of administrative control, and you're putting trust in your providers. Now that said, because there is this motivation to move there, the controls are getting better. I don't know, has anyone here heard about the Netflix Simian Army? Netflix is taking an automated approach to, they're a huge consumer of AWS services, and they're taking a more automated, almost a bot-like approach to protecting their resources within the cloud. So if you're interested in that, you may want to look into that. They've got, they call them monkeys, security monkey, chaos monkey, custodial monkey, all these little bots that maintain their presence in the cloud. If resources fail, if security configuration changes, things like that. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of controls in the cloud are advancing. Another one is this homomorphic encryption. I don't know if anyone has heard about that, but it's typically when you put things in the cloud, you can't, if things are encrypted, you can't process them, right? So homomorphic encryption is something that people are looking at to allow you to still do some processing on encrypted data. My point is, and I'm not an expert on these, but technology is evolving. People are looking at the cloud and trying to develop controls which will provide greater assurance there. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more work in that area.
I would just say, from my perspective, two things. One, I worry less about the data that enterprises know are going to the cloud or that the providers have security in place. It's more what commonly is called rogue IT. Today is a whole new crop of companies are coming up. I've been on a couple of national telecasts around this issue of companies popping up. I'll name names during the break if you want some names of companies, but really doing what we call cloud risk assessments. And so what does that mean? It's the idea that what's already happening in your enterprise that you don't know about. So staff going places, and there's literally hundreds of new cloud providers coming up all day. We don't call them necessarily cloud providers. You think of Amazon or Google or Microsoft. I'm talking about software as a service. It could be social media. It could be anything that your staff and your employees in your enterprise are going to access in the cloud. So the point here is this. Some studies done, and just literally was on a panel with one company, blew my mind, literally like thousands of apps that employees were going to in the cloud that the security team didn't know about. And in some cases it might even be companies saying, well, I don't mind them going there, I don't mind them going there, but again, were the controls in place, were the contracts in place, were the relationships in place? So again, I worry less about the ones that the IT departments know about and that you have a contract and a relationship and the security and, is the encryption good enough? I worry a lot less about that in the cloud than software as a service and rogue IT providers. So the idea, what I mean by rogue is people are just going out and putting stuff out there. One of the funny examples I heard, freechinainternet.com. Freechinainternet.com, it's cheap. It's real cheap. It's $0 and 0 cents. You have back up your PC for free. And, literally. And people doing this, so people going out, free is good. People say it's a deal. And so they'll let me, we'll back up your data. We're going to give you some free stuff. And, people, hello, look at the name, freechinainternet.com. I mean, what part of this don't you understand? But people are literally doing this kind of thing. And you have no idea, there's no contract in place, they're just, click, 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 check the box, and they're moving. So, there's a lot more we could say about this, maybe during the Q&A we can get into some details, but, do a risk assessment on your cloud situation. Where are people going now? And maybe they're not calling it cloud, they're calling it some service, they're calling it free backup, they're calling it whatever they're calling, but the reality is there's risk.
Well, welcome to my world in higher ed. And you mentioned something here that I find really interesting in terms of our audience too. When you mentioned the importance of contractual obligations here and contract evaluation, one of the challenges we see is that our technology specialists spend a lot of time in higher ed really mastering the technology. But when it moves to the cloud, you're trying to make sure that all of the technology pieces that you know and all the security standards that you have documented and perhaps just have it as part of your culture but not documented, all of those things need to get moved to the contract. How did you develop the expertise in your organizations to make sound contracts for your cloud services?
So, trial and error. When you start new things and you try new things, you don't always know what you're doing. I was lucky enough to be part of a group for the Center for Digital Government where we worked on cloud procurement contracts. And so there's a set of terms and conditions that have been published that handle software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. And those are very specific, and they all have security issues. All the issues that we've talked about are there. And what we did is we invited the private sector to sit in the room. So now the companies that are trying to provide to government and the governments are all agreeing on common T's and C's. And so when the contracts are coming forward, they're much easier to negotiate. Our attorneys at the county have done an incredible job. Our corporation counsel has done an incredible job of working on these contracts, and we have people that specialize in technology contracts, but it is never the same depending upon who you're dealing with. And so by having common T's and C's, at least on 80% of the way there, and we can fight over the 20% instead of trying to fight over the 80%.
And I'll just add one quick solution to that. If you're doing research in this or you're looking for answers, research FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act, but specifically under that, those are standards and procedures, but a program called FedRAMP. FEDRAMP, one word, FedRAMP. Just do Google that term. You'll see lots of providers. What it really is this. It's federal government has set up processes and procedures and certification process to say these cloud providers have these services, we know they're secure, they meet a certain standard, and so that every company isn't going through the same analysis every time with the contracting terms and conditions are in there. It's almost kind of a one-stop shop for that. Interestingly enough, many people say, well, Google and Microsoft and Amazon are all in there. They are. But ask them in your company, if you have relationships with them, am I getting the FedRAMP certified service? You'll hear silence. Because oftentimes they'll have multiple levels of service. Just like you go to a car dealership and you get different types of cars, you can get different types of levels of security within the same companies. So FedRAMP and FISMA are two things. The feds use that. The states are increasingly using FedRAMP as well. A lot of states are now adopting that. And it's kind of like, security, processes, procedures, standards, contracts, and laws that gives you the answers.
which that was around 10 years ago. We created a security exhibit that gets added to, depending on what service it is, and I think it's this thick. And then it's all the negotiations of what is relevant for the work that's being handed to the provider versus what we've asked them to do. It is laborious and takes months sometimes.
Well, let's look at this from a little different perspective. How about an ethical perspective on this? If I share my personal...
I'm sure we'll need to put that right here.
If I share my data with you, a state or city government or automotive provider, if I share my personal data with you, can you then take that data and store it in a cloud service in the country, outside the country, without, do you feel any ethical responsibility to notify me?
Nope.
And why not?
For the same reason that people broadcast their location, for the same, you've given your data. You chose to give it to me. So unless there is a contractual proviso that says, once I have it, I have to protect it in this way, I'll protect it like I protect all the other data that I have.
Once you give it, you don't own it anymore.
Exactly.
Once you hand it over, it's ours. And I know there's laws and there's regulations and statutes that require you to provide data to government for certain things. And our job then is to do everything we can to keep it secure. And that's all we can do. Now, whether I keep it in Texas or I keep it here in Michigan, it is what it is, as long as I'm keeping it secure and then I'm managing it.
I would say all that's true, but let me soften it a little bit. Because we're in public, so let me soften it a little bit.
The camera's rolling, by the way.
So I guess a couple of different pieces to the ethical piece of it, right? So you provide us data, as a government because, there's penalties if you don't, right? So we like tax, we have to collect tax. Now, there's some trust, I guess, that the technical professionals will secure the data. And so, and I think it's actually better that way, because if we just toss it out to the general public, and the people are not necessarily IT, you say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm putting your data in the cloud, and then what do you do with the responses, right? So someone like, Phil's point with the Wi-Fi, someone might say, well, no, I'm not cool with that, I don't put my data in the cloud. Well, now I've got this huge data management problem where, if I'm going 85% cloud and some of my internal infrastructure is now private cloud, I really almost don't have a non-cloud option, and I can't have this one-on-one dialogue with every citizen that wants to. So you really need to kind of trust that, the IT people are doing the right thing, and that we're going through the laborious contract negotiations to say, your data's safe, as safe or safer than it would be if we stored the data, and it's kind of under the, it's really kind of below the waterline, I think, for, to kind of open that up for people to decide their own fate there. But the flip side of it is that if we did a better job of kind of integrating some of the data that we have, we likely would be able to make government more responsive to citizens. So if we know that you're, enrolled in these two programs, and that we might be able to say, hey, and you also qualify for X, Y, and Z type of benefits, or if you have interest in hunting, camping, and fishing, maybe we could, be more proactive in kind of tying some of these dots together. The same way that a lot of the private sector is doing, except that, you're really not the product for government, right? You're the service recipient of it. So the same mechanisms, I think, can be applied, but we're not seeking to, monetize your input. It's really more about how do we do a more effective job of presenting government services to the citizens. So I guess that's the other ethical piece of it.
But one last piece too is that you realize that the majority of your data is public record. So there's very few pieces of data about you as a person that are held confidential. And, social numbers, some of the personally identifiable information is held confidentially, but the majority of the data that's provided to government is considered public record. And people can walk up to a counter in a government office and request the entire court document for a divorce proceeding and get all that information right over the counter. And understand that there are people out there that, so there's this group out there, that I forget the name of them, but they do a sunshine rating on governments, on how open they are and how much information they provide on the internet. We always get like a C+. I'm proud of that C, it's passionate. But they want us to put, like, they even want us to put our check registers online. Every check that's written by the government, they want it searchable to the public. There's thousands, if not millions of records. And then what happens if I write a check to a witness, or a witness fee, or something that I have a law enforcement official that's doing some undercover work and they have to go out and buy something and I have to tell the public that we wrote a check for that? So there's this open government movement that's out there that says everything should be open. You should just take all your data and throw it out online. And our point is that, yeah, that's okay, but there's a lot of folks out there that have no clue that when they file a mortgage or they file a deed with the county, that deed is discoverable and they can just walk in and get it. So let's all make sure we level set what you want to have access to as the public from government versus what does an individual want to keep private. And you'll find out that privacy piece is about that big when the open government piece is that big.
Well, and on top of that, I don't know how many other people in the room get communications of the ACM, but last month there was a great article on the 7 companies in this country that do data aggregation. That's all they do. They just buy data and build user models of each and every one of us. So when guys like Titus who want to social engineer you, that's all he needs, right? How many of you have secret questions that include what was your mother's name? Where did you go to high school? What was the mascot of your high school? Those things are really easy to find if you just use Google. Now, if I have an open searchable database that tells me where your life's history, it becomes even easier. So know what you're putting out there, and like Phil said, know that most of it's not hidden. So if you've got easy to figure out secret questions, well, then somebody's probably going to reset your password. We've done studies where most of your passwords, believe it or not, 15-character passwords, I'll bet you every one of your passwords starts with a capital letter, is a word, a number, another word, and then one of 3 special characters, the exclamation point, the pound sign, and the @ sign. Why? Because most of us are right-handed, and those are the 3 keys that are easiest to hit. Okay? So I see some smirks around. My job here is done. You're like a psychic, Joe.
The first database we put out to the public, we did focus groups and we invited the public to come in and sit in these rooms and, with the 2-way mirrors and all that. We all sat in the back and watched, and they started explaining what was available to the public. And the people started to rise up. I mean, it was a horrible thing. They started to yell, the government's nothing but a bunch of working retired. How dare they release my data? And they were going on and calling us names, and they opened the door and pushed me in. Said, he's responsible for it. And that first battle we did, there were people that actually were going to file lawsuits. There was all kinds of things that were going to go on because that data was available. Today, those same people are consuming that data online. Just like the Wi-Fi argument that Dan made. There were people that were afraid of it, but now everybody's using it. And this is what's going to happen with all of our information as well. I couldn't agree more too with those challenge questions. So we were doing challenge questions for the passwords for our county. And I had to go into Facebook, and we went into all the social media sites and checked out all the questions. And we had to ask challenge questions that weren't consumable on Facebook. So we got weird things like, the dog that preceded the cat that was run over by your mom's car. Stuff like that.
The answer is mittens.
Exactly.
Well, this is a good point for another audience question. Do we have a question from our audience? We have a gentleman over here.
Yeah, it's about privacy expectations, and I think it applies to the cloud as much as to the
Can we
internet.
get a microphone so we have it recorded? Thanks.
Thank you. It's a question about privacy expectations. A couple of you have mentioned this, and I think it applies to the Internet of the Things as well as to the clouds. And I think it's a question primarily to the gentleman from the automotive companies, from Ford and from Fiat Chrysler, or whatever the name would be next week. As you mentioned.
I hope that doesn't make it to public.
I just want to emphasize again, regarding the privacy expectations, what is your thought about Internet of the Things regarding the automotive technology, when you look at the global automotive and the info system, entertainment systems, and sharing, and we go even a little bit ahead in the future where the car might be used as a storage device for energy, when you compare the European spin on privacy issues and the US, not to talk even about some other countries involved, how would a product like the automotive, which kind of rules both of our economies in the transatlantic scheme of things, and then also looking at the transatlantic trade investment partnership that we're now negotiating, so how does this all play out in this realm of your products, and what are your thoughts on this? And sorry, I should have said I'm a business attorney. I'm also a senior advisor for the AmCham Germany as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney, so I'm reluctant to discuss too much about compliance and Ford's position. Needless to say, there's a lot of complexity in being a global company and different compliance requirements from Europe to China to the United States, so on and so forth. That's why we have a legal staff to iron those types of things out. I feel kind of at a loss to, because I'm not an attorney and I'm not up on all those compliance requirements, to come up with a detailed response to what you're asking. I wish I could be more forthcoming.
Yeah, I have the same challenges here, but know this, when we have those privacy discussions, it is a global team. Obviously, we're very tightly aligned with our European partner. The Italian data privacy laws, for example, are known to be stronger than many other of the EU members. So we are trying to comply. We will comply with those laws, and since we're sharing those platforms everywhere, Brazil, the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Italy, we are going to be compliant with the laws.
Yeah, and I would not limit that to what's in the vehicle. Clearly, we're doing a lot of things with log collection, internally on our network, things like that, and we have to deal with the various compliance requirements, not only with the vehicle, but with our own internal business. And clearly, we look at that and cross the T's and dot the I's with our legal team, understand those compliance requirements, work with those government entities to ensure that we are not breaking the law, and we, hold back on deployments until we get those types of assurances.
It's a challenge. The laws keep changing. Russia just recently created a privacy law where the primary version of the PII data needs to be stored in country. So we have to comply with that if we sell vehicles over there. Or here in the U.S., everyone knows that California tends to have the most PII or cyber laws. I mean, they were the first to do create a data breach notification act. So complying with all these rules as they change, when your customer base is all over the world, it's very difficult.
That's correct. And privacy is just a piece of it. In some cases, it's technology. There's restrictions on certain technologies you can use in China. And there's talk about, growing in-country industry and restricting use of things like Oracle and other technologies for financial institutions. So as Titus mentioned, these laws are evolving constantly every day, and just trying to deal with that there's an immense amount of complexity.
I wish I could be part of the government so I could just take that data. Legally.
Yeah, not in the United States.
The answers are very different for a corporate entity.
Mm-hmm.
Another question from our audience. Oh, we have one over here.
Morning. Jim Abbey from Fiat Chrysler, not on one question oriented. But with that in mind, we started, I want to bring back to the gentleman earlier that mentioned around smartwatches, wearables, and so forth, and that information. So tied into the cloud theory that we're talking about there. We started automotive, progressive, a little dongle, you put it in the OBD port, the information got back, I got something. I was fine with that. Moving to where smartwatches are going, your thoughts, maybe government's involvement of what it's telling about, because it's heart rate, it could be different things in the future. Where are we headed down that way from a personal devices?
Where are we headed with personal devices?
Yeah, I would say again, I'm not necessarily an expert in the privacy aspects of this, but my research shows, the evolution, as you look at the history of the presentation I gave earlier, think in terms of 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, right? And think about, that level. I mean, right now, there are very few laws, and it's voluntary industry in California saying, we'll sell police, but by and large, there is not much out there. And I'll tell you that the view of privacy is all over the map. You go to IoT events, on the West Coast, I've been at several of them in the last year, and no one's going to say I'm against privacy, right? I mean, privacy is the holy grail. So everybody purports to be for privacy, but how they do that? Are they part of a larger framework? Are they sharing with other devices? Can you hack a microwave and get access to a smart system, or your smartwatch speaks to your smartphone, speaks to your smart house, to your smart government or smart city, whatever. I'm telling you, it's all over the map right now. My sense personally is that as things evolve, like you'll hear court cases, you'll hear, there'll be oh my gosh moments that people will say, I can't believe that this happened, and then, our legislators will rush to, outlaw something. I don't know what that something's going to be, but, really, I can see everyone's, blood pressure in this website, and I can see your blood pressure from some public portal. I'm making that up. I don't know what it's going to be, but there'll be moments like that in the wearable market, and then there'll be legislation to try and, corral that back in. So I don't foresee right now much in the area of regulating smart devices, and I think that's going to evolve. That's my view.
If I can make a comment here, again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not worried about the devices. I'm worried that now that data exists, that someone will use that to either punish or punish someone for not hitting their steps. Many companies out there give you pedometers. They want you to record like how often you're walking. What if now I have to pay more for healthcare because I forgot to wear my iWatch that day, and therefore it didn't look like I got my exercise in. That concerns me. Because it's there, so how will they use it?
And I totally agree. I mean, we would say my time in government, but I see this across the nation. I talk to different people in the private sector. The value, we always talk about the devices. Everyone wants to have the latest iPhone or, Droid or whatever, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, whatever. But the value of the device is going to zero by and large. The industry has said that. And the data is worth so much more. And if you don't believe that, just think about, a laptop. We used to say back in, 10 years ago, we didn't encrypt all of our laptops in state government. And we had this big debate, we should, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, why would we want to do that? And then we, bottom line, a few people lost some laptops, and there was data on that laptop. That data on that laptop, that citizen data, was worth way more than the value of the laptop. Now, if in some states, it's public record, Utah and South Carolina and others, where they've lost, devices or USB drives or, whatever, millions of records. This is worth virtually nothing. This USB drive in my pocket is worth virtually nothing. But if I had all the citizens of Michigan's data on this, 10 million times, what is it, $250 a record? Do the math, right? I mean, so it is. The device's value, to your point, and I agree, the device is worth way less than the data on the device. So it is all about the data. And my comment earlier, really about legislation, it is around the data that the device is collecting. So I agree with your comment.
Yeah, I mean, we said it with the vehicle-to-vehicle communication. Insurance companies set up a responder. Titus was talking about, people getting punished for not making their steps. Well, what if I can aggregate enough data that says, you've chosen an unhealthy lifestyle. You eat at McDonald's. All right, fine. I'm just going to raise your rates. So at what point, and it's legal because you're telling me these things. I'm not going and getting them, I'm not hacking, you're putting it out there. If you put it out there, it's the digital equivalent of dumpster diving. I just have to collect the data, and there are plenty of people, especially at universities like this, that do big data analytics and specialize in how I crunch those big data sets into something marketable. That's why we do these things, to sell them. So if I can build a model of you, and I can sell it to somebody because they want to sell you something, or they want to
assess the risk of your insurance. Bonus. It's called capitalism.
Yeah, that's an.
The efforts started through the security effort.
I can't hear a word you're saying.
And thank you for the comment. Switching from an ethics is maybe to today's theme, security. How would we secure that there? Is it EAL? Is it the different levels there? Your thoughts around the security that some of the students may be looking at is how do they go approach that information? The difference between a large company securing it or a vehicle versus what am I going to do with my personal watch? How do we secure that?
Don't wear a watch.
Well, Ellen,
Or a Fitbit.
just to continue on another point they were making, it is the data and who has access to it and uses it. I know if people have heard about Windows 10 coming this summer, and the fact that your personal devices are going to be, you have biometric controls. Biometric controls in my mind are incredibly scary because you are talking about that it is you, something you are, but when that gets compromised, it's easier to change your password, but changing your fingerprint or your iris is a completely different story. So who has access to that? How will it be used? Regarding how to secure it, we talked a bit about passwords today, and I can't say enough about multi-factor authentication. Okay, that's clearly a control that is coming more into vogue, and that's one of the ways that you can try and prevent people from spoofing you and getting at your stuff. So there are other controls we use in the corporate environment, but that's definitely one that I would mention.
But that's a great example. So when we started this whole computing thing and we came up with user ID and password, two-factor, right? You're not supposed to tell people your username. But most browsers today, most programs today will remember it for you because you're just too lazy, right? I come from the DOD. I had a boss. We have smart cards. We were all walking around with these cryptographic access cards. She used to give it to her aide with her PIN number because she couldn't be bothered to do her own travel vouchers. Right? We make systems foolproof, and God keeps inventing better fools. So it's about convenience versus security. I can make a very secure system, but then you're going to go and strap a Fitbit to yourself and tell the world where you are. Well, you've just defeated everything I've done. I know this doesn't answer the question, but this is the battle we have in security. If we make it too secure, all someone has to do is pull out their personal phone that's got LTE, very fast speed, and say, hey, next time you email me, email my Gmail account. And then share my documents on emails. And I have no way to do e-discovery. I don't know what's out there. It doesn't even touch my infrastructure. So we have to make it easy enough that they're enticed to use it, but we need to discourage those other services and punish them. Punish is a strong word, but let people know the risks of not using the approved methods.
People hate to hear this, but one of the guys who works for me says that the only place convenience comes before security is in the dictionary. So, security professionals like to say that, but nobody wants to hear it because everybody wants the convenience.
Well, that was Secretary Clinton's.
Yeah, we're going to call it the Clinton effect.
Yeah.
Dan, you had a point here?
I think that is favoritism.
I just wanted to say two other things that I saw when I've gone to IoT events, back to your wearable question, is that we had several vendors. There were several vendors, I'm not going to name names here, but they were presenting much more secure solutions. They cost more. And part of it does get back. The message I would have to everyone in here is, again, you're going to hear it's like a broken record. Where do you give your data? So you'll see more and more of, and I'm not going to, whether it be Facebook, whatever company, Google, say, if you do this, I'll give you this free, free healthcare if you tell me what your blood pressure is. I mean, whatever it is. And remember, there's nothing free in this world. So then that data now is out there, and now so you're trading your blood pressure for something. Or, and these are the trade-offs, and whatever the app is, whatever the new phone is, whatever the new smartwatch is, whatever, if you give me X, I will do Y and Z. And so the question you need to be thinking about as a consumer is, you get what you pay for, right? And so it's back to the question of, I think you will be able to buy more secure devices. But the one that blew everybody away was a guy that came up from China. He had a translator, I don't remember what the company was, and it was $11. And it was wild. I mean, the audience was packed and thousands of people, and everyone was oohing and eyeing, and they had all the cameras flashing, because it was an $11 wristband that gave you all your health information. I mean, it was a wow, right? And everybody wanted it, and it plugged into your smartphone, and that was the one that everybody was at. And the secure one down the hall, unfortunately the panel that I was on right now, I mean, no, but the reality was that people didn't want to spend $175. Because it was the $11 versus the $175. And that was just one simple example. But what I'm telling you was, I know I actually met the CEO of that other company, and it was a lot more secure than the $11 option. But again, it's back to kind of like, do you want better tires on your car? Do you want a more reliable fill in the blank, right? Or do you want the cheaper option? Do you want the one that's on sale? Do you want the one that's free? So that's part of the decision, is what are you doing with that data? How is that data being used? I think that's something you need to be thinking about.
Risk management.
Yeah.
Risk management is what it is.
Let's move on and explain.
Does Dan have something else he wants to say before we move on?
There you go.
Phil's still thinking about sheep over here.
We know you like it. Let's expand this conversation to bring your own device. Let me tell you about the world I live in higher ed, where we have a population of 20,000 students, we have hundreds of faculty members, people stop in and stop out, so our authenticated population is about 70,000 people. They may show up on any given day of the week with the device that they have purchased, with apps on it that they have selected, and I know that with all those apps, they very, very carefully read all of the agreements before they clicked the agree button and loaded them. So they're going to come to work for you. And they're just like yesterday's plumber that brought their own plumber toolkit. They're going to come to work for you with their own toolkit, their own computers, their own smartwatches, and they're going to expect to use those on the job. Are you ready for them? What are you doing about it?
All right, so we're doing a pilot right now, bring your own device pilot. Now there's some restrictions around it. So we have a mobile device management software. There's a container that is going to contain kind of the state-approved programs and section off the data. If the phone is lost, we can wipe the container piece. So we're doing what we can, I think, within the limits of the technology that exists today to try to make that as safe as possible. But I guess getting back to the theme of the day, it's a little cumbersome for the user, because they've got to kind of go into this other area. And plus, if it's their device, there's a thought that, well, I bought this thing and I'm paying the monthly fee, and you're forcing me to put the stuff on there that I may or may not want. But that's kind of where we are, I think, just in terms of, again, the technical evolution of the space. To a certain extent, I guess it gets back to the question about, if I have a wearable device, how do I make it secure? I guess the answer is you can't, because it is what it is. If it's a consumer device and it's kind of targeted at a certain market, enterprises are always a little slow to adapt to these things. The PC was kind of smuggled in, and people started using Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then all of a sudden we had an IT department to support it, and not necessarily the other way around. So, we will adapt to bring your own device as we get more people that want to do it, which causes the market to respond and come up with a cleaner, more well-integrated way to ensure that we have the controls around it. But to a certain extent, a lot of these operating systems are not open source, and we don't control the hardware. And I think to a certain extent that maybe the desire for more of this control is what's spawned this makers movement thing that we're seeing a lot of these days. People are doing some hardware hacking, and they're kind of integrating open source to create their own devices, and to the extent that can turn into sustainable businesses for people, I think that's good. But to Dan's point, our behaviors drive a lot of this as well. So if we all had security as our number one priority, and we just had no interest in buying the devices that weren't secure, then people wouldn't build them. But because we like convenience and we like new things, and we don't often like to think about security, because I think in our minds emotionally there's always kind of a negative connotation to say, well, security makes me think of loss of my personal data, all my stuff getting breached, my credit card numbers are stolen. It's not a space that people naturally like to go. But the unfortunate side effect of that is that it creates more of what we don't necessarily want, or I guess more accurately, what is not necessarily good for us.
Lou and Titus, what about the corporate world?
You can see I have two devices, the personal device and corporate device. We have dipped our toe in the water as far as bring your own device. We let people synchronize certain data that we don't think is confidential. I would like to share a story here is when I was the one, I bought an iPhone and I wanted, man, this is so awesome. How can I use it at work? And I was looking at synchronizing email. And all of the lawyers said, absolutely not, no way, there's too many risks. I said, well, can I enable it for you? Within a week, like, this is amazing, how do we make this work? And we sat down and came up with a strategy to secure it, to make sure that, that it didn't have any legal implications or whatnot. And it was really, really good. But now, people have different expectations. Email was just, again, dipping your toe in the water. Now people want all their notifications, and they want to get the experience they purchased. If they bought an Android, they want the Android experience. If they bought Apple or even a Windows phone, they want it to work that way. The container applications we have, or the methods we have for securing that, destroy that experience. But that is definitely a risk versus reward.
Special challenges that the state of Michigan faces with cybersecurity and the things that we've been talking about.
I don't know if we have any special challenges, right? So there's obviously it's a big target, it's a government target. There's hacktivists that tend to probably target government more than private sector, but I think it's really more typical of any large organization. We face the same sort of cyber threats, the same sort of challenges with our internal processes in terms of classifying the data and making sure that we're all kind of marching in lockstep toward the goal. So I don't know that we have anything that's way out of spec from what other large organizations face. I know it's kind of a disappointing answer, but.
A couple of you have mentioned during the course of the conversation today data classification, and that may be a term that not everyone's familiar with. What goes into data classification in your organizations? Is that part of the security operation, and who makes the decision?
I'd say it's just jumping in now. So it's a combination. So it's generally IT will try to facilitate some of that to kind of define what the buckets of the data are, but really it's more of a business function to say, if this data were to become public, what are the consequences of that? And sometimes it's designed to be public. Other times it's that's not great, right? It's either there's fines associated with it, or it could cause some reputational damage, and then there's the other stuff that some consultants call it the radioactive data. So that's the information that's really tied to personal identity or things that are heavily protected, like health information, that sort of thing. And so getting a handle on what the data is helps you to protect it, because it's difficult to protect everything equally. And so the things that you definitely want to protect, you need to kind of take the scarce resources and align them to the right spaces.
But one of the problems you have, especially in government, is that we can talk to the business units of government and say, okay, these are the systems we want to go through and do a data classification project on. We think they're core systems, and they can do that. But then that data moves from that system into another one. And they don't see that as a critical system that they have to look at. So what we're trying to find is, when we identify those pieces of data, where do they move? And when they move from one to the other, then I need to get to that system too. So it's all great if I encrypt my ERP system and I take care of social security numbers for my employees in one place. But if they move the data over into another system to go ahead and use it, and it's not encrypted, now I've opened up my security hole again. And this project is ongoing. So this data classification, you can do a round of it or a phase of it, but then every time something changes, or a new piece of a system or a new piece of data is combined with another piece of data, we have to go back and do it again. And this is going to be ongoing, and we have to school, and the hard part is the perception from the business people, because they think they're done. I already told you where social security numbers are in that system. Yeah, but now we've just added another system and it's moved over. Now what? Oh, we didn't think of that. So it's an educational piece that's just going to have to, it's the project that will keep on giving.
Right, big data is a huge challenge to preserving the intent of data classification. it kind of always surprises me that people aren't familiar or lack familiarity with data classification because it's so foundational to security. It tells you what you need to protect and what you don't. The other thing I would say about it is most people look at it from the confidentiality aspect, what if it, unauthorized disclosure. But there are other aspects. The most common industry ones are integrity, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. It's the integrity of the data. What's the impact if your data is not accurate? The other one is we've talked about as well, availability, denial of service. What's your dependency? Do you have that data when you need it? And if you don't know those things, you really don't know how to protect your data. I mean, you don't need redundant systems if you don't have a high availability requirement. You don't need confidentiality if the data is public. You need integrity. But you need to do that classification exercise to understand the security and how to secure your data. And if you don't do it, you're kind of shooting in the dark. Or you're doing the peanut butter approach where I'm trying to secure everything, which is really not a sustainable equation.
And I think you also need to do awareness. Again, you can do all your data classification, you can do all your data security, but if you require an employee to perform a function that you have not given them the correct tool set, they will find a way around it. How many of you have admin assistants? Well, okay. How many of you people in business have admin assistants that have a spreadsheet with all your passwords, your credit card number, your passport number? So, because they're the people that are making your travel arrangements. So, Phil's gone and secured all that data for me, and somebody else has just built a spreadsheet that has it because it's more convenient to them. Right? We hire people because they're smart and they get the job done. But what you have to do is enable them to get the job done securely, or they will find a way around your security.
So, Joe, little commercial message there. Yeah, security manager does security awareness. But I'm not going there. Actually, I wanted to go back.
Is that your company?
No, I don't own the company. No, I work for that company.
Oh.
But no, I'm actually not. It's not my point. What I want to actually go back to is something that Rod said about. I agree with him that state government, in many ways, is very much like corporations as far as challenges. I do think government has something, though, that I want to mention today. I was hoping we get a chance to do that, that's unique. And I think, I say this, well, there's a number of things that are unique, but one of the biggest ones is attracting and retaining talent. And I think, there's a challenge right now because the market is so hot. In fact, I talked to, during the break, 3 or 4 people I know here from companies that are looking for people. And almost need to have those people stand up. People looking for jobs and people who are actually here to, matchmaking thing about, jobs and employers that are looking for people. It's a very difficult thing. I would just say I'm an advocate. Actually, I'm now in the private sector, but I spent 6 years in NSA, 17 years in government and Michigan government. And I'll tell you, there is a great opportunity in the job space in government, whether it be at the state level, the county level, the local level, or the federal level. And I just want to put a little pitch in here, actually, for government employment, because I think, the pay may not be as good initially. I remember when I first joined NSA in '85, the pay was not as good as the private sector, but I'm glad I did that. And the experience you get, the breadth of opportunities in your job is actually greater in many cases in the government than it is in the private sector. I'm a big advocate for government cyber jobs, but I do think it's a challenge right now because the market is so hot that cyber talent is probably one of the top issues that we face as an industry. And there's a big pull. I mean, it's a great time to be graduating with a computer security degree. You're going to have a lot of options. I know the automakers are great places to work as well, so I don't want to knock them. But I would just say, if you're thinking about what role to take and where to go with your degree, if you're a student here or maybe you're looking for a role, really consider government, because I got opportunities to do things in government that I know I would not have been able to do in the private sector. So I just want to throw that out as, we kind of jump past that question. I do think government has a hard time. There's a stigma that why would I want a government job? Or why would I want to work for the government in cybersecurity?
But it's an area that I think brings a lot of fulfillment beyond just the salary and provides opportunities.
I would, getting back to the data classification. By the way, working for automotive rocks.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. We love you guys. Unlike Dan's company. I mean, Dan.
Data classification, as the gentleman up here have already said, is the key to information security. If you're going to a startup, first thing you need to do is inventory what's out there and put a value to it. And IT facilitates that discussion, but we don't make those decisions. If they're having a hard time deciding if it's confidential or highly confidential, ask them how much they're willing to spend to protect it. And that'll tell you really what it is.
Or how much they're willing to spend with once it gets out.
Correct. And obviously I'm speaking about the data that is company data, not like HIPAA data or PII, which is defined and you know what the legal requirements are for protecting that. So evergreening that data requires data mapping. You basically have to look at where that data is today, what other systems interface with that, and update that all the time. Obviously, you can't do it for all your data, but you do it for your highly confidential data, do it for your PII data. As we all share data with others, and then they share it with others, you need to then figure out, how do I protect it? Are they protecting it as carefully as I am? It's a laborious job. It's not fun. And this is where you need to have your business partners work with you. Let them be your advocates. Let them understand, whenever they're making a decision like, hey, we want to get data from this place or combine it over here, they realize, oh, I need to talk to security, or I need to talk to the privacy office. We need to update these diagrams. So it's an IT, again, IT is facilitating it, but we can't do it by ourselves. Otherwise, every year you're looking at blank stares of, what do you want me to do? What's Visio? You know, that kind of discussion.
You mentioned Visio. One of the challenges that I see is that we have a multi-tier data classification policy. Some of our data are classified as confidential and some are public access, and then there's classifications in between. But trying to make sure that the classification stays with the data element and then the assigned security to protect the classified data. As that data element moves from one system to another system and out to a cloud provider, making sure the classification and the related security goes with it is a real challenge. You mentioned using a Visio diagram. What other tools and techniques can an IT professional bring into this situation to actually track that?
There actually are information classification tools out there. I won't say the name of one. Unfortunately, it's the same first name as me. It's not the one we use. But yeah, there are ways that as the data is being generated, people are compelled to choose one of the classifications, and that lives with the document. Same thing with where data is stored. There are tools out there you can say everything that's in this file share or in the system is confidential, and it gets tagged in the metadata, and then you can track that as it moves around. But again, first step, what is sensitive, where is it stored, so you can start this process.
But I think you need to have rules, and people need to know how to classify things. I worked with a gentleman 15 years ago now, but he classified all of his emails sensitive, not for release, so that you couldn't forward them, because we had automatic classifying on we had to automatically label all our emails, and so he just set it just one notch higher because he didn't want his emails forwarded to anybody. Well, how realistic is that? So at what point do you over-classify data? And so I think that is or under-classified data. I mean, both are dangers. So the tools are good, but it's always comes back to the human, and God's making better fools. You know, people will use that tool in different ways, or in ways that you haven't imagined.
Oh, I can't forward a confidential document? Well, that's okay, because it's not confidential anymore, it's internal, you know.
Exactly.
Well, you also have legal issues too, and so when you talk about data, there's some data that by law we have to release as government, where we may classify it as sensitive just because of the nature of the data. For instance, you know, I use a court record as an example. You know, a court record has to be complete when it's released. Well, there's a lot of sensitive data that goes into a court record. So then as a government, you have to decide, what do I redact before I release this record? So those conversations are constantly going on. If you don't classify the data, you never can have that conversation, because you don't know it's confidential. You don't know it needs to be kept private. So It's very important to do those projects.
Right. Let me underscore one thing Titus said is, it's not IT's responsibility to classify the data. We don't know enough about it. We manage the technology. The business side owns the data. They need to be accountable for it. They know how it's used and how important it is. It's their responsibility to classify. We help them, we talk to them about it, but ultimately it's their responsibility.
Which, you know, can feed into our next slide here, our next question. I'd like to open this up a little bit differently. You mentioned at the state of Michigan level the difficulty in obtaining, attracting IT talent. Speaking as someone who's seen a department experience 25% termination since last July 1, I think we're all feeling the effects in Southeast Michigan of a recovering economy, IT workers going everywhere. Technology's changing, you have to build a team. What are you doing to attract that IT talent in your organizations and retain it?
So it is a challenge. We're at kind of a pretty interesting point. So we've gotten some extra money in the IT budget to do some legacy system modernization, some infrastructure refresh, and I think that gives us a unique opportunity to try to bring in kind of as a consolidated wave some new stuff for people to work on. So some of this is perception, some of it is an unfortunate truth that, because of the cycle of the economy, the money into government is not always consistent, and so we have a lot of old computer equipment. And IT people don't like to work on old stuff. They go into IT because they like new technologies. And so even if I go back to my first job when I was at Ford, I was a PL1 programmer on a Multics system, which was old even back when I was first starting out. And I remember sitting around with my friends, and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing some C programming, on Unix, and it's really cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing some S-Tran, PL1 on this old, mainframey kind of thing." It just doesn't make you feel very good coming out of college saying, "Well, I guess I'm an expert in something that kind of was obsoleted 10 years ago." But times are changing, and government is modernizing. And so, to Dan's point, I think that there's an opportunity not only to work on some of the newer technologies, but also to work on a lot of different systems that you probably wouldn't encounter. So one of the challenges that I may have overlooked before is that we have so much different types of systems and data, and we're covered under every single regulation that you can imagine. So we've got health information data, we've got tax data, right? We've got stuff from the Secretary of State, as well as things from things like the DNR and environmental quality. So pretty much every sort of vertical that you can imagine, except for manufacturing directly, is in government. And it is, I think, a nice springboard, if nothing else. I mean, you can come in and get a lot of good experience, and then if you choose to leave government at some point and move on to the private sector, I think that's an attractive and unique aspect of government that is sometimes not top of mind.
So, when you talk about government too, and we have another struggle, is that they don't see government as being innovative. And when we did some surveying of young people when they come out of colleges or universities, was that the salary was not their number one requirement. The number one requirement was that they care about what they do and they want to make a difference. And they don't think that government is a good place to go make a difference. Really, it is the place that you make a difference. Everything we do every day impacts people's lives. So we started looking at our internal operation. I have a 23% vacancy rate right now. And at one time, I was 29% vacant, just because we couldn't find the people. So we raised the salaries. We did a study, and we raised our salaries to be competitive with the private sector. Great. We implemented flex time, and we're doing telework pilots right now, so we're trying to find new ways. I'm never going to have a slide in my office. I'm not going to make sure you're only 150 feet away from food. I can't do that. You're probably not going to be able to bring your dog to work, but what I will do is I will make sure that you're able to go home in the evening to your family. And I'm not trying to trivialize any of this. It's such a problem for us because we're competing against so many sectors that are booming right now. And then the other piece that we have to do is I'm actually redesigning the floor space of our office. You walk into a traditional government office and you go, ugh. Tall walled cubicles, Everybody's jammed in like rats. Even when you have natural light, we have walls in front of the windows to block the natural light because we were afraid that they were, we wanted to create mushrooms or something. I don't know. But what we're doing is we're opening our workspaces and we're creating collaborative work environments because we know what's coming. This new type of IT worker that's coming to us, one is only going to stay about 3 to 5 years. So we're going to go invest in them, and we're going to lose them. That's okay, because maybe someone else is investing in another one, and we get them from them. And then we'll just keep doing that. And then the other thing is that I really need to prove that they're making a difference. And for all of you out there that are looking for your careers, government makes a difference. And local government, and nothing against my brethren at the state, but local government is where the rubber hits the road. That's where people actually go to get services from government. We see people every day. And there's an actual a great satisfaction that we get when we provide a service and that we help somebody with something they need. So that's my pitch for government. Now the other thing too is one last thing on talent. Don't come to us with just pure technical talent. I don't need you. I can rent you. I can rent technical talent and I can rent them for wherever around the world. What I can't get are people that have technical talent with soft skills, whether it be project management skills, business analyst skills, the ability to go talk to people. He's pointing to her over there. I'll give you my card after. But what we're doing is we're trying to get people that can work with people and build enabling technology so they can deliver a service. That's what we're looking for. So that's what I would suggest that you focus on.
So when I try and get people to come work for me, I work for a nonprofit. So salary is,
that's worse than government.
Salary is nowhere close to the top priority. But we challenge our workers to be innovative. We give them projects that bend people's brains and we say, hey, how can we make this work? And that's why I think people come to my company and stay there for long periods of time. Because we are doing community service and we're working with underserved, underrepresented parts of the state and in fact across the country. But I think from the IT part, it's that challenge. It's more than a, hey, I'm going to show up and I'm going to run this batch job. And I've interviewed people like that, and they don't have a job with me. Because if you show up and your contribution to the incident response team is that you run the script, you don't program it, you don't analyze the results, well, like Phil said, I can actually have a cron job run the fracking script. I don't need you. So come with something else. Show me that you're bigger than I can program in Java and C++. And those are the people that we want to hold on to. The folks that can write, the folks that can do a presentation to all levels. Right? So the only people you can talk to are other ultra geeks, probably limiting yourself. Okay? If you can go and explain this to a room full of people that are wearing ties, okay, now you're starting to show me benefit. Because the people with ties are the ones with the checkbooks. And they're the ones that I want to show the benefit of this project.
How about in the automotive industry? What are you looking for, and are you having any difficulty identifying talent?
Working in automotive, like Titus said, it rocks, okay? What's going on in automotive right now is incredible. I'm sure you've heard Mark Fields, and innovation seems to be a very key word here, and we're living it at form right now. We're changing the way the world works. We've got very young employees who are actually working with National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on setting standards for vehicle communications. We're, making, it's just IT and automotive. We've had some of our upper management say IT is becoming the business in automotive, and it's a great place to be. We're working, flexible working arrangements, things like that. Bring your own device. We're trying to get these things in, and because they are attractive to younger employees. But let me tell you, it's the opportunity to work at Ford, a global company, the variety of opportunity there. I've been there a long. I'm an old guy. I've been there almost over 30 years, including agency. But I started out doing litigation support. I was a site manager at our Southeast Michigan training facility for about 5 years. I've run an integration test lab. I've been in security for about the past 10 years. I've gone through the quality program, the Six Sigma Black Belt program. The opportunities in automotive and the variety of opportunities are amazing. And I think it sells itself.
We need to regulate you more to stop all
But yeah, if you're, plus, I mean, I love the Mustang, don't you love the Mustang? And that Ford GT, let me tell you, yeah, working in automotive is good.
Yeah, ooh,
If I can afford it.
We're friends here. You pretty much said everything there is to be said. You are, let me just say, you're entering information security. If that's your passion, what a fantastic time to be in this field. Everyone wants you. The job will change. You'll never get bored. I think back when I started doing this 15 years ago to where I am today and what we're expected to do, I've never been bored. So you need to make a decision about, will the job challenge me? Will I have an opportunity to create something? Will I be encouraged to innovate, or are you being asked to just do what it's always been done? So look at the opportunity. Think about where it'll grow. Think about what you want to do and what you bring to that. Again, automotive, before it was IT and business, now we're like this. I'm sitting there with the engineers designing the security in the cars. That never would have happened even, say, 3 years ago. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is, IT is really a huge part of the automotive business. The other thing I want to mention, and I don't know if it's kind of a little known fact, but we've been hearing about it recently. Is anybody here familiar with the Ethosphere organization? They create a list of the most ethical companies in the world and who are ethical in their business practice and so on and so forth. And Ford Motor Company has been on that list for 6 years. And I know that's very important in attracting talent and some talent, that people want to work for a company that they believe is trying to do the right thing. And that's another one of the great things about working at Ford is our leadership, I think their head's on right and their head is on right, and we try and do things the right way. And it brings a certain amount of pride to the work.
So I would just give one last piece of advice. As you're doing your studies and you're looking at what you're learning, remember that that Oakland, our college is here to teach you how to think, not what to think. So when I started, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 1986. Networks involved telephones. So that's what I did. I did a lot of telephone engineering. And then I put in the first email server in Europe in 1989. And technology now, I'm running around worried about smartphones like everybody else. Well, that basic education that I got from 1982 to 1986 is still relevant. So stick with the basics, learn the basics, and then that way you'll be able to adapt as technology adapts and the challenges change.
I'd like to point out something else here that I'd like to bring into the conversation. It doesn't escape my view that there's a difference between who's sitting here and the person standing behind the podium. What you mentioned earlier, the need for global teams to work on problems. We know that diversity improves our problem solving and our creativity. Diversity is represented in a lot of different ways. It's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, racial diversity, age diversity. We want those perspectives around the table to improve how we do things. What can we do together, collaboratively, to create more diversity in our profession?
Well, I think you could start, I'll blame Tripco for only inviting old white guys. I think that diversity is always going to be a challenge. I think it's going to grow. But the students, student women in engineering, support those organizations. Get them involved. Eastern Michigan does a neat little thing called Digital Divas, where they bring in high school females to show them technology. So I think that diversity is about advertising yourself, engineering universities advertising their programs better. Data structures suck.
All right, nobody likes taking that class, get over it.
That's a great marketing campaign.
Remember, I did 26 years in the Army, so a certain amount of time, you just ruck up, move out.
But when you think about diversity, it's not just incumbent upon us to create diversity. It's incumbent upon those to get involved in what we're doing. The Michigan Council for Women in Technology does a wonderful job, and there's other groups out there that try to get folks involved. I only want to hire the best people. I don't care what kind of people they are. I want the best. So we need to make sure that even down into the high school level, even the middle school level, my wife's a middle school teacher, and to watch, at that point in their life, they're already deciding what direction they go in by the types of subjects they like, whether they like math or science or English or whatever it may be. We need to be all the way down into those organizations saying, you can be whatever you want to be, but here's the opportunities for you. I'll hire you based on your capabilities. I'm not worried what gender you are or what race you are. I just want the best people, and that's what we have to focus on.
Just speaking in general, I go to a lot of hacker conferences, that's why I look the way I do, but I've seen the evolution here where now there's people from all over the world, people of different nationalities, cultural differences, and gender. It really, I used to feel uncomfortable bringing my wife. Now the ratio is getting closer. It's really exciting for me. And I think one way we can all support that is if someone is curious about security, or that you can just kind of see their mind works that way, talk to them about it and say, have you thought about it? Like, oh, I'm not very technical. You don't have to be super technical to be a great security person. You just got to be able to ask the right questions. So that's something that we try to do at FCA. We invite a lot of interns, and I sit down with almost every intern, and we have a little information security discussion, and sometimes I see the spark, like, oh, I know you're going into supplier relations, but how about you come back and spend 3 months with us and see if this is an area that interests you. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes they go, yep, thank you for the opportunity. It's not for me.
I just want to add, I think it's really exciting to see the number of women actually in the room right today. So I applaud you for that. And I do agree that this is a challenge. It continues to be a challenge. One thing I think we're seeing a trend, probably everyone on the stage could probably see the same thing. It's amazing the number of people that are calling me, even when I was in government, but even now in the last year or two, that want to get into the security space. They see it as a hot market. Maybe they're system admin now, they're mid-career, they're early, they're in college. I have people who just graduated with degrees in history who want to get into security. It is a hot space. Taking those opportunities, like you mentioned, I really agree, and talking to people. I think two other things. One, mentor. If you're young, if you're a student coming straight out of college, you need a mentor. I mean that. You need to have a mentor. Some of you don't know what that means, or what that looks like, or how's that going to work. I mean, you know what the word mentor means, but I mean, the point is, having a mentor in your career is really important. There's a lot of great articles about this out there in the web. There's a number of great organizations. I know, like MSISAC in government, when I was there, we had mentors, young CISOs and more veteran CISOs, but men and women, you know, so taking people under your wings and mentoring people and helping them in their careers. And then also, the other thing is helping people set a vision that it's not just about, you know, cybersecurity is all about, you know, it is, to a large extent, there's, you know, encryption and technical and firewalls and all of that, but it's not just geek, technical encryption. It's, you know, helping people have a vision for their career and what they want to do, and what, you know, kinds of things that Phil was talking about. You know, really making sure people understand the opportunities that are out there. I've had a similar opportunity that Joe mentioned. You know, been around the world, lived in England for 7 years, had a chance to travel all over the world and speak. I mean, you don't think about that when you think about a cybersecurity, you know, geek kind of guy. So, I mean, God's been good, but I'll tell you, it's also, I've had people who mentored me, and I think, I love the phrase, I'll leave you with this thought, you know, if you've made it up to the top floor, you need to send the elevator back down. So I think all of us, for the young people, need to mentor others, and if you're young, I would highly encourage you to have a mentor and help you in your career.
Lou, were you going to add something?
I was going to add, and I think that the comment about getting into the middle schools and the high schools, we've seen a lot of increase in STEM initiatives. And I think that's incredibly important to drive that, increase that diversity in the future. That's where you seed it, really. You let people know the opportunities in these types of careers and the importance of those types of skills at a very young age. And I think that is really laying a foundation to further grow diversity.
You know, one of the main questions we ask.
Can I pipe up on the diversity?
Oh, please, sorry.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
So diversity it's complex. I've been reading a little bit about it recently because it comes up a lot, and there's a lot of studies that say that diversity is a good thing. But what makes it good is really diversity of thought. And I think that a lot of the buckets of diversity that we think about, if it's gender or ethnicity or whatever, those are really just proxies for diversity of thought. And to Phil's point, you want to get the best people. And to a certain extent, I think to get the best people, you really want to sort of be blind to all forms of diversity except for diversity of thought. And the challenge, I think, when you say, okay, I'm looking at the panel, there's not a whole lot of diversity, I think that some of that is rooted in sort of the culture of IT and engineering. And I think it's really that culture that has sort of self-selected, the people, right? So if you go back to the children, the people that are going to kind of be attracted to IT typically they're more geeky. And, as we all remember,
Me too.
Right, but as we all remember from high school, I mean, it's relatively rare that the ladies want to hang out with the geeks, they want to hang out with the football team, right? So it's, but
I was one of the geeks,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, that's cool, but I think that, as we start, as the new generations are coming up, and people see IT, I guess, as more of a career and less of a lifestyle, if you will, that I think that's really going to be sort of the solution to diversity, is that people can maybe stop identifying cybersecurity or engineering or whatever with the pocket protectors and the people in the basements. It's just like, well, to Dan's point, it's a hot market. I can have a good job, and then I can still go and be a social person or whatever it is, right? So I think that maybe that having an understanding of that split, is helpful.
What a great time to be a nerd. It doesn't matter your age, your race, your gender. Again, being a nerd right now is cool. So join us.
Nerd. Each of you has talked about, at some point this morning, each of you talked about different things you've done during your career, technology changing and you being involved in new projects that took you into sometimes new countries, new settings. It's one thing to approach technology changing as an individual and you keep working at it. You're all in leadership roles and you have to make sure that an entire organization moves forward with technology. What goes into making that move? How do you motivate an organization to move forward with technology? And how do you encourage the organization to keep pace? You mentioned the state, getting behind. We have to encourage those around us to come along on this journey moving forward. Joe, maybe you start with this one and get us going.
So the interesting thing in the military, operations drives everything. You don't care what it costs, you figure that out later. You just got a job to do, you're going to get the job done. You come over to the civilian side, sales runs everything. Sales and budget. Because if you can't find the money to do it, you're not going to do it. So what I find a lot of my job is finding the benefit so that I can make a cost benefit, a risk benefit argument to the people with the money, and then I get my project done. So if I can do that, and this goes back to how you find the right people, if my people can articulate that, then I can do more. I can show that I can take the company in new places. We've done that a lot with like virtualization. I can sit a whole bunch of people down, not Phil, but people in suits, sit them down and try to explain them virtual machines, and you watch their eyes glaze over. Now they don't understand. Now, you talk about, I can decrease your electrical bill, and I can increase your availability, and I could do these quantifiable things that they understand. Okay, bingo, I'm the man of the hour. So it's being able to identify the technology, but it's being able to articulate the cost and the benefit that will succeed.
Yeah, I would agree. You have to show people the benefit, what's in it for them. The other thing I would note, though, is regardless of any change, you are going to go through the bell curve cycle of change, and you are going to encounter resistance. So there is a certain amount of persistence in your change methodology that you need to be aware of and be prepared for. But I would say those are a couple of, obviously you need to show the improved state from the current state, but you need that persistence to follow through on the change.
And Dan, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do. I think a couple mindsets. Number one, come with solutions, not problems. So there's a lot of problems in your management, whatever job you're in. You know, your boss probably knows that 6 things aren't working. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe you need to lay out the, you know, presentations for a long time in security for years. If you came a decade ago, we could just run a whole hour of just headlines of bad news, bad news, bad news. You know, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Just scare the heck out of people and then leave, and you know, big round of applause. And you know, that doesn't work anymore. You know, you maybe as an appetizer in the meal, but it's not the main course. You've got to come with solutions. So if you want to lay out the problem for management, fine, but you need to be thinking enabling, you know, okay, we got this issue, whatever the issue is, we got this problem, we got this challenge, now here's 3 ways we can solve this. Maybe give us some options, gold, silver, bronze, give a couple different solutions. Another thing I would say that you really need to think about is how key, and it took me a long time as a geek to get this, about relationships. And, you know, do lunch with people. Really think about, you know, building both in your company, in your industry. You know, IT people, most people in the world, my wife and my daughters and a lot of it aren't in IT, they do this naturally. They love to go do coffee, go do lunch. IT maybe not so much. Put me in the corner, throw some pizza over the wall, and just let me code, right? I mean, you know, so that mentality is not going to lead to career success. You've got to build relationships. You've got to, you know, network in the industry. You're at a conference like this, great. You're in the OU club, wonderful. You need to build relationships in industry. You need to be involved in a wider industry like InfraGard, other types of groups, ISSA, ISC squared, whatever it might be. And then lastly, I think this. One thing that I've used in my career is think about a problem that needs to be solved. IoT is a hot one now. BYOD, some of the things we talked about today. You're an expert in a certain area. You have a skill. You have a passion about a solution. Great. So you think, you know, my idea could be the next, I could be the next Bill Gates if this sells, whatever it might be. We all have ideas, that's fantastic. So then figure out, what does that look like, and then work backwards. So, you know, Matt, picture yourself, you're on the stage, you win the award for the best X product and innovation 5 years from now. Now, what are the steps you need to do to get there? We did that a lot in the state, we're very successful with it. We literally would say, if we can solve this issue, and we can do these 4 things, in 3 years, we're going to be standing on the stage winning a national award for the best state government in the country. Now, what do we have to do that in the next 3 years? And literally work backwards and come up with the solution. And it works. It really does work. But it takes a lot of hard work. It takes, you know, sweat equity. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But the reality is if you got a vision, be an enabler. Don't just come to management with problems, come with solutions.
Yes, Phil.
So, build trust. And everything that they said, and we're just like all adding on now. But you have to build trust with the people that you're working with. And one of the ways that you can build trust is to deliver. When you have executive sponsors, and in my world, it's elected officials, and your executive sponsors, and you go and you educate them, and you don't talk too techie, right? You keep everything at the layperson term where they understand it. And then you get them all charged up, and they get behind the podium and say, this is what we're going to do. And for instance, my boss, he gives a State of the County address every year, and everybody knows L. Brooks Patterson. And he gets up there, and he will pound his hand, and he will tell you exactly what we're going to do. But then your job doesn't stop there. You have to continually educate them, because every single project we've ever had, nothing ever goes without some sort of hitch. And when that hitch happens, you don't want to lose your executive sponsor. So you have to constantly be educating them, informing them, working with them, because the next year when he gets on stage, he gives a report card of the things he said he was going to do the year before. And he has to be able to say, good or bad, that we were able to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. And if I don't educate him, and if I don't keep him in the loop, and I'm not constantly communicating with him and selling what we're trying to do, then he gets up there, and if he leaves that reservation and he leaves me hanging, then I have a chance of failure. Does that make sense, everyone? You have to work with these people. They don't just know this stuff intuitively. And the more you build that trust, the better off you'll be, because guess what's going to happen? We're going to get attacked. And when we do, I want my executive sponsorship and my stakeholders to say, I trust Phil, that he's doing everything we can as an organization and his team to solve the problem. Instead of shooting at me in the newspaper saying, they didn't do what they were supposed to do, I can't believe this happened to Oakland County, and something's wrong with our IT department. I don't need that, because now the trust gets deleted, and now I have to work all over again and work hard again to build it back up.
And if you turn the telescope the other way, so all of that is also true, and to accomplish that, you need to get the team moving, right? And so I think it's kind of a classic change management problem, and I think it goes back to the what's in it for me. And I think that you need to get to a critical mass where you have enough people sort of doing enough of the right things that you can get to success. And there's kind of a micro and a macro, so each person is a different person. So you do different things for the people on your team, your immediate team, you get to know them better. But then, if as that starts to expand, you can only know so many people, right? I think the Dunbar number is like 150 or something. So beyond that, you've got to say, okay, so let's appeal to maybe what brought you here. So in government, there's people that have been there a long time tend to have a strong belief in public service. And so you can appeal to that and say, all right, well, by implementing these new technologies, we're delivering better services, faster services to the citizens, and we're kind of fulfilling the mission of government. If it's, other people that maybe are newer in their career, you could say you're going to get a lot of great experience training in new technologies. Both of these things can be true at the same time. And then hopefully, you get enough momentum to try to get a lot of the projects past the point where they can be successful. Now, you're always going to have some component of people that are not going to be on board, either because it's not in their self-interest. So if you have someone that's, let's imagine they're a year away from retirement and you're going to swap out all the technology that they've spent their entire lives doing, they may not be thrilled at saying, I've got to go to a training class and kind of do this. So that's natural, right? You get that. But if you can kind of assemble, and this is I guess the tricky part of the leadership piece, you have to sort of assemble a vision that's going to accomplish the mission while also enlisting enough people to be able to actually get it done. And I kind of look at that as the trickiest part of the job. So to Dan's point, it's partly relationships. I think it's partly Steve Jobs style inspiration, and it's partly being technical enough to be able to chart a course through that. And then when you sort of get those three things lined up, then you can have some sustainable success.
It's a good point. It's a good time right here for another audience question. So do we have some questions? We have right here. Behind you is the mic coming.
Testing 1, 2, there we go. There's been a lot of discussion about the, whatever you want to call it, wetware, meat space. Getting buy-in, getting traction in terms of security. And it seems to me, I come from a couple of decades in advertising, IT. It seems to me it's marketing. It's all about marketing. Mr. First name rhymes with analysis tool you discussed.
Yes.
You go to the hacker conferences. That's one of the things I wanted to know. How many of you guys go to Hope?
We send our team people.
Black Hat X, yes, that's what I figured. Not you, but somebody.
I occasionally will go to a geeky
conference. And then come back with stories and tell people the heart-stopping stories of, dental boxes, whatever it is. The really fascinating stuff that's like, they can do that. One of the best managers I ever had was somebody who was outstanding at telling a story. And he could, basically he didn't even have an associate's degree, and he ended up being an executive vice president. He finally got his associate's degree. What this guy had was the ability to work with people. The guy was phenomenal, but he built it over time. He didn't start that way. And I'm thinking, basically what security needs in an organization, a corporation, is marketing. Okay, coming from an ad background, I'm talking a whole different lingo, but this is what I keep hearing over and over and over and over and over again at this conference. It's all a marketing problem. You know, of course, there's elements to marketing, budget, plan, attraction.
You're basically trying to sell something that no one wants security.
Right.
Exactly.
So that
you make them want it.
If there was one thing to add to all the awesome comments, you guys really said it. I couldn't say it any better, but it is, you need to be a salesman.
Yeah.
You need to look at your audience, say, okay, who's in the room? Because there are some, at SEA, we have some very technical vice presidents. I mean, these guys know their stuff, and ladies as well. So I need to make sure I'm speaking technically and can answer their technical questions. But if I have other business people in the room that don't understand these things, I need to be able to change my message and keep them on target. And I need to build that trust. They know I'm not just trying to sell fears. If you asked me to answer that question 3 years ago, I would have said fear and walked away.
You know, I think it's evolved over the past 10 years. Obviously, 10 years ago, it was a much tougher sell. Now, every day you open the paper, and there's a story there motivating people's interest in security. So in that sense, I think it's gotten a little bit easier from a marketing perspective. But I would agree with you. You've got to, make the case for security.
If I can tell one story. A long time ago, we used to use these little secure ID cards at a company. And, it automatically generates a password, and everybody hated it. And I was sitting in an airport, and a gentleman walked up to me and said, "Are you Titus smelling it?" "Yes, I am." And he threw it at me. And said, "If I ever have to use that thing again." And so I got creative and found another solution, PKIs and whatnot. And we looked at, it's got its own risks here, but it motivated me. But that was knowing my customer, and then since I was successful there, being able to address some of his other concerns and telling him, meeting with this person later and saying, what else bothers you? What do we make you do that makes life tough? Like, I give a lot of presentations to executives and to their town halls. And when I hear muttering like, "Hey, what are you going to break next for us? I can still get my job done. What are you going to turn off next?" I go to that. So, I'm not trying to break your job. Well, specifically, what is the issue so I can address it? So you got to be approachable. You got to let them tell you when they're doing stuff under the table and say, "I just want to let you know we're doing this. We know it's bad. Can you help us?" So it's trusted executives, trusted users, just all, it's part of it.
So I hired a marketing person in our IT shop. They told me I couldn't, so I asked for forgiveness after I did it. Yes. And I brought her in because we have a shared services platform that we are working with other governments to use. So I needed someone that could go out and sell it. But then when you start looking at the marketing of IT, it starts inside, because everybody that answers the phone in our operation is a direct line to the citizen. So then if there's a technology that could answer that question, then I need them to be able to talk to the citizen about next time, go to www.oakgov.com and you can get that answer. So that maybe is a phone call that doesn't have to be made. Then I have to work with my business units to market the resources that I have that they need to enable them to do their jobs. So we have marketing plans for that. And then we have these external services that we're providing, so we have marketing plans for that. So after a while, and I've had her for a while now, and she does a great job. She does a wonderful job. Now other departments are trying to get her to come in and market their services. It is about marketing, it is about selling, but we're not always good at that. And I know in government, we didn't come to government to be salespeople, so you have to cultivate that and grow that, and you have to embrace it. If you don't embrace that you have to sell your services, then your services will never be used. And nothing worse than investing money in something to not have people use it at the end.
We had one other question right here.
So with LG, installing spyware on their TVs, and Samsung with their thing and Sony with their rootkits, why is there no security person internally stopping these things? Why are there no legal consequences for a company that LG just apologizes and issues a patch for these things? Why is there no one being preventative when there's security people like you inside these companies that should be doing their job, saying, "Hey, it's obviously going to blow up in your face if they find this blowfish or this spyware or this rootkit inside"?
Because I'll tell you that if I was the guy building the TV, that wasn't a bug, it's a feature.
You know, it was something to enable my technicians to be able to better push a patch or to better analyze the light quality in the room so that I could dim or brighten your TV. I guarantee you that no one sits there and goes, hey, I want to make a TV that spies on people. What do you think?
Except if you're bored.
So what about a better example? The ThinkPad with the software that was installed that basically super. Right. I mean, it was basically to monetize all of your searches, and of course, the unintended consequences are huge security concerns. But everything about that can't be sold to the consumer in a good way. To me, I think it shows that their IT security isn't in alignment with the business. Again, I think anybody at this table, if you would have told us that, or like, have you thought about this? At least had the conversation. I'm not sure they had those conversations.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to that point, so, you know, obviously we don't know the internal actual truths about any of this, right? But, you know, like Joe was saying earlier, there's different levers and drivers in organizations, and so, you know, so a lot of times the commercial sector, it's sales, and then, you know, the salespeople tend to kind of, you know, sit amongst themselves and say, hey, I've got a great way to monetize some stuff, and then it comes to IT as a feature request. And then IT sometimes, you know, pushes back and says, well, I understand that there's risk. I think occasionally there might be a spreadsheet created to show like a, you know, risk reward kind of thing, and they're saying, well, okay, so if the potential fines are less than what we're going to make, let's move it forward, and then that turns into a business decision. Obviously, there's a lot of ethical considerations and things like that, but you know, these types of trade-offs, I think, are made more often than any of us probably realize, and a lot of it really comes down to, you know, what are you optimizing for, and what's the goal that you're chasing, and if companies are always chasing dollars, then, you know, by definition, everything else kind of takes a second place.
I kind of had a little follow-up. So what do you do?
You know, I'm sorry, we really do have to move on. Thanks. So we're on the last question of the morning. We're looking at resiliency, and that's a term that maybe we're not all familiar with. I wonder if you know, we're all at risk. We're all having things get exploited. Phil, you mentioned a little bit, it's going to happen. What does it mean to be resilient, and how do you approach that professionally?
Wow.
I'm glad you're going first.
Yeah. I would like to relinquish my time to my esteemed colleague. The resiliency, you know, you can look at resiliency in a number of different ways. One, you can look at foundationally how resilient you are as a business. And in government, we look at that as, here's the services we need to provide, here's the revenues that we have, do we have a balanced budget, which Oakland County has a balanced budget through 2020, by the way. And, you know, come work here. But there's ways to be foundationally resilient in what you do. But then there's the issue of, do we have technologies that enable us to be resilient as well? And the problem we have in government is that I still have technologies that were built over 30 years ago. They still exist, and they still do really good work. And we can talk about, you know, and Rod talked about the fact that the state is going to have some additional funds to replace some legacy systems. But those legacy systems are still functioning. So when you think about our ability to be resilient, and then to build enabling technologies to keep us resilient, and then secure them, it's a struggle for us. Because we don't have enough money to do everything we want to do. And I think everybody at this table could say that. If we had an endless pot of money, we could do all kinds of really cool stuff that would be really, really secure for the most part, and would be very consumable. But we don't. So we have to pick and choose our battles. And I go back to the comment I made earlier about managed risk. Sometimes you just have to say, that's public information, our risk is low, I'm not going to worry about it. And someone will say, yeah, but that's your website, that's 23,000 pages of content that get people entree into your government. I say, yeah, as long as they don't deface it, they can have it. If they want to steal 23,000 pages worth of content to look at, go for it. You're going to learn more about Oakland County than you ever dreamed of. Now, if you want to change it all and make us look bad, by the way, which has happened to governments over time where they've had their websites defaced, then I have a problem because I lose respect, I lose credibility, and I lose everything that goes along with it. So being resilient to us means to be foundationally sound, fiscally conservative, structurally sound and then have a good team on board. And then I can worry about the enabling technologies, and then I can worry about securing those technologies because I have a good foundation on which to put them on.
I think FireEye said there are companies or businesses or organizations that have been hacked, that know that they've been hacked, and then there's those who don't know they've been hacked, but they just don't know it yet. I mean, so the challenge of you've been hacked, or you just don't know that you've been hacked. And the challenge of, breaches is the bad word. We haven't used that word yet up here, but, incidents, bad word, but the reality of you're going to have incidents. You're going to have, sadly, breaches. Maybe you don't know that right away. But when you talk about the national framework that's come out in the last year, by identify, detect, protect, respond, recover, it was always about just, stop, cyber defense. No bad guys are going to get in here. And then the philosophy in the security community is they're probably already in. They're probably already in your network. And so the question of how can you be resilient, and I agree with everything Phil said, but in the security context, in your network defense, are you prepared in that kind of an environment? So, if there is a breach, if there is an incident, how do you respond? How do you recover? How can you limit the damage? Do you know the steps? Have you practiced? So just real quickly, do you do exercises? Do you test your plans? Do you work as a team? Do you do that kind of a thing? That's really what Joe's the expert in. He can talk about that for the cyber range. But I mean, the whole reality of this is the world we live in, and you need to be resilient in a sense of you're not going to just be able to stop every hacker and every attack every time. It's not going to happen. They're going to get in. And so what are you doing around this ecosystem, and not just within your organization, but also with partners? So how are you working with law enforcement? How are you working with IT companies? How are you working with the cyber range? How are you testing this? What's the governor going to do? What's the CIO going to do? What's the CISO going to do? What's your team going to do? What's the SOC going to do, the Security Operations Center? That's really all of that, which is, this whole conference is on this topic, but it is around resilience.
I would agree with that. And part of that resilience is that ability to respond. You know that it's going to happen to you. And are you going to stumble around for a week and be exposed in the paper like we've seen in some exploits? Or are you going to understand what's going on in your environment, identify it, take it, and eliminate the threat? And by doing that, it's a question of trust and credibility, which have come up quite a bit this morning. And if you don't have that credibility, you won't be resilient enough to come back, okay? If you fumble around, the public will lose faith in you, you will lose trust, and you will fail, and you will go under. So a lot of it is, how prepared are you for when the bad event occurs? Do you know what you're going to do? Have you practiced? That cycle time, we see this metric all the time. Oh yeah, they've been in and they were in for 200 days, and actually it's come down from like a year and a half. So we're actually getting better, but when you get breached, half the time people don't even know for an extended period of time. And that's where we need to exercise that muscle. Get that discipline, put in the tooling to get that visibility, practice your response, and so when something happens, you will be able to do something about it and maintain that credibility.
Agreed. I know this has turned into more of an incident response discussion, but when that incident happens, you need to know who you're going to call, and you need to follow a plan, because you will suddenly be in a room full of everyone's a security expert and everyone has an opinion. So you have to.
So if you just said Ghostbusters, you're wrong.
But
we're all thinking it.
Yeah. But again, so you need to know who's going to be making command decisions, who's going to organize things, who's going to make sure that the business side is engaged, who they will call, who the public relations person will be. Because again, when the cyber bullets are firing, you'll make poor choices if you don't know what you're going to do.
And so like Dan said, we do a lot of transitioning what used to be done in tabletop into more realistic scenarios. One of the things that we've done over the last year and will continue to do is involve law enforcement. Because a lot of people don't know what's going to happen when they have to call the cops. And so it's critical for you to at least consider, right? At this point, I need to call the police. What do I expect them to do for me?
What are they going to do to me? How is this relationship going to work? And the same with all your partners. You don't have to do it all, fast-paced cyber exercise, but the first step in resiliency and incident response, I think, is definitely doing a tabletop. Because to do that, you have to identify the players, you have to identify the information that everybody has to bring, and what we've found and shown to companies is not everybody speaks the same language. And so what is an incident to me might not be to your privacy officer, or when your privacy officer is getting peeled off the wall because this certain type of data just got leaked, and everybody else is just kind of shrugging their shoulders going, yeah, okay, there's public data anyway. How does that all work? And remember, all this stuff usually happens Thursday afternoon about 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So who gets called? It's a huge problem. Don't just write the plans, practice them. And I think that is your answer to resilience. And it also helps you set expectations. Too many people watch CSI, and so they think that this forensics happens immediately.
Solve the world's problems in 45 minutes plus commercial.
Enhance.
I've often said, I get asked, how did this particular data element get out into the wild? Well, they're not barcoded yet. They're not microchipped. I can't just follow data as it flows around. How did it get out in the wild? Tell me.
But if you have one broken femur from someone's right arm, you can figure out how tall they were and how old they were.
Right. Do we have one last question from our audience today? We have one right here.
Great.
Well, could you hold on a second, Renee?
This isn't good. She wrote it down.
I defer to Rob.
In terms of disaster recovery and putting security first, and then sort of building the application or whatever you're talking about, say that in the cars we were discussing earlier, that people's data gets stolen from the cars, or a collision occurs as a result of that. What is your plan if the data in cars that, like, self-driving cars that are already out on the road get hacked, and you have to somehow apply some kind of patch or some kind of fix to those cars? What is your plan?
I'm glad Chrysler and Ford have to answer that.
It's a perfect kind of question for us.
If you have this car out on the road and it's hacked and it requires a patch to fix, what's the plan for getting the patch out there? And that's the Internet of Things, right? How do we patch these things?
Well, I'll just speak, again, I'm not the expert in this. I can only speak to what I know, and again, these are my own opinions. Do you guys know how many people actually take their cars in for recalls? Like, hey, you get a warning, hey, there's something bad is going to happen unless you bring it. I'll just leave it at that. Very few people actually get their cars fixed. So when I think about the cybersecurity of the vehicles, I'm very concerned, because I know if I don't do it for them, it isn't going to happen. Right? I mean, look at the Microsoft products. Until we went to a patch Tuesday, a cadence that happened and it just happens automatically, people didn't fix their things. So it's something that we're discussing in the vehicle. How we flash firmware, how we update radios, how we close security holes. It's not impossible. I believe it was BMW. There was a vulnerability found in their vehicle, and they released a security update to fix it. But if we can't address security vulnerability, if we think we've created a foolproof system that will never be hacked and we don't need to patch it, we failed. So that is part of our discussion.
That's exactly right. And I don't know if you've read the paper. There's an announcement recently, I think just this week, about Ford's working with Microsoft and Azure. Essentially, what you're doing with the car is you're supporting your arrests. And like Titus said, patch Tuesdays, things like that, and out-of-band patching, you need to have that capability. And so that's how we intend to address it. And there's a communication device within the vehicle, and over here updating it either on a regular cycle as well as out-of-band as necessary, depending on the severity. And we're seeing that already, like you mentioned. There was the issue with BMW where I think it was remote unlock, was being exploited, and they were able to issue an over-the-air patch.
That's all not as cryptic voodoo as you know, you might think. We've been doing it with radios for decades, you know, over-the-air rekeying, you know, and then when it's really, really broke, somebody actually walks up with a little thing, plugs it in, and forces the patch. So those are good examples. I think the bigger worry is what happens when something happens and you get into a fail state. You know, what happens with your car? Does it just stop? Or with any of the Internet of Things. I mean, I like the home security systems. Everybody's seen the commercial, you know, grumpy dad sitting on the porch and kids drive up and he whips out his phone and starts turning off faucets and turning off the lights. And me and my buddies sit around and we come up with perfect crime. Because most of those home systems have hard default passwords. So the challenge is find your IP address. Not really a challenge. So what happens when I know that and I can turn your security cameras off, raise your garage door, drive in, park, lower the door, steal everything in your house, reverse the process, turn the cameras back on, you now have President Nixon's 7 minutes of silence. At what point can you change that? Can you alter that operational state? You know, who can override that system? I think in the Internet of Things, that's more the concern than, I think, you know, pushing patches or monitoring patch levels for that matter. I think those things are going to, you know, how many times do you restart your browser? You know, most people don't even turn their computers off anymore, but they just restart a browser. This is going slow. Control-Alt-Delete, bang. Yeah, now you're talking about your car moving at 80 miles an hour. Oops. You know, you don't want a blue screen. You don't want the blue screen on I-96.
So if it takes me somewhere warm, I do.
So I think those are things that we're going to have to work out. You know, at what point does your car download the patch and then wait for you to stop for a certain amount of time before it applies it? You know, your house, your refrigerator, you know, how does that all work into your rhythm of life?
Clearly, that's already a consideration. I heard the term on the radio the other day. John McElroy used it, automotive-grade software. And really it is that ability to fail gracefully. I mean, clearly there's security concerns. You're in your car and you can't have something reboot and put your consumers in danger. You have to be able to anticipate failure mode analysis, FMEA. Anybody feel like this is a quality technique, but you have to consider those things and design to, you know, do your threat models and design to fail gracefully and prevent those types of, you know, address those concerns.
I mean, going back to the unintended acceleration issue, right? There was a lot of looking into how the vehicles communicated. Could it be a computer system that caused, you know, just a failure within the system, much like our big blackout? I don't know what the rest of you, but I was in my car stuck in traffic, and when the radio made the announcement, it wasn't a terrorist attack, it was just good old failure. Like, all right, yay! It was just an accident. That could have happened in a vehicle right now, right? Something could occur, and we need to make sure that goes into a limp mode or into a safe slow down state so that people aren't just losing all power to the vehicle, like if their key were to fail.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you today for an inspirational presentation. You've all had great success in your careers, and you've shared your wisdom very pleasantly and in an entertaining fashion today. Many thanks to our keynote speaker, Dan Lorman, Rod, Phil, Joe, Titus, Lou. What a fantastic panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for coming. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. And that concludes the 2015 Cyber Summit. And a big thank you to Teresa Rowe for moderating and to our panelists.
Say it.